Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the Off Angle. We are here once again with another episode. I think, technically speaking, would be episode 5, at least in terms of recording. We've got the Zywoo episode up as a part 2 for the last one. So just sort of pumping them out, really, to be honest. I'm once again joined by Pranogo over on my left-hand side. And then down below is we've got the esports historian, Thorin, of course, which I've never said. Feels great to say. And, of course, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Right. I mean, I've technically dropped the in historian now. I'm just esports, but whatever. I was prepared for this role my whole career.
There you go. There you go. But
they do say know thyself.
Aye, yeah. Indeed they do. Indeed they do. But yes, of course, really appreciate you coming on, content creator extraordinaire. And I think as well, something that I kind of want to add is someone and you know, yourself and Richard, of course, and I guess now maybe Semler as well, just saying the things that often some people are a bit scared to say, you know, and that does include myself a little bit, where I'm still early on in my career and all that. It's difficult, but every now and then a voice has to kind of pipe up and stick your head above the parapet, is what my father would say, and you know, kind of get the words out there and let the people know what is up. You know, so yeah.
I would say on that topic, that's actually a really tricky one for people who want to work in the industry, because that's the main problem I think most people have. Is there's a lot of people who just, obviously it's what Twitter's used for nowadays anyway, it's just like political arguing and stuff. There's a lot of people want to be like a nobody who's in the community or just a fan, and they want to come out and call out like this company and this team and this player. It's like, well, don't think you're going to work with them then, mate. Like, that's it. You're done. You're blacklist from day one. Like, that's the problem. It's not that I don't think people should speak out about that stuff. The real problem is this. In a sane world, it would be like me, Rich, and Sam, like a few people who sort of earned the status. And by the way, it's not easy. You're walking a bloody tightrope when you do it. But we've got like just enough leverage and just enough people that they can't sort of push us out the scene easily. It's not like they're choosing like, right, this person or this person. But he did criticize that. As long as that's never the factor, right? Here's the problem. If you wanted, if in a sane world, we'd speak up and then all the fans would say it as well, so there wouldn't even be a need for other professionals. But the problem is this: if you're a professional who's just starting out, it is really dangerous to like take strong stances on those topics, because like I say, think of that same analogy. If you are the guy where they barely know you and they're judging between someone else they barely know, and then they're like, right, could go either, oh wait, that guy did call us out, that will actually maybe get you blacklisted. So that's why you notice one thing I always say, it's like a classic quote of mine, is I don't ever actually recommend anyone does it the way I've done it, because I'm me and I've barely managed it. So I don't know how you're going to manage doing the same thing I have. So you got to really, I would actually say on that one, it's not what I did, but I would say in the modern day, because I don't think you could essentially do my career or Richard's the same way we did it now. I think it was a different time. I would say in the modern day, you probably want to build up a certain cachet of like respect, status, gigs, and then gradually work into making sort of big statements or commenting on things. And even then, I'd start with just your specialist area and simple things that, you know, something in the game. I wouldn't just go straight for like, this is what I think of China. Like, that's, you're opening a massive can of worms when you do that, you know. Because a lot of people do seem to get, you notice, by the way, I worry about it, because in the same ways when I did the desk, I got the vibe a lot of analysts started trying to throw crazy banter out there, and it's like, dude, is that you though? I just do that because that's what works for me. I get the vibe a lot of new journalists think, oh right, it's why they get in trouble with me and Richard and get smacked down all the time. They go, right, oh, what you do as a journalist is you just go around calling people out all the time and go, oh, you know what, Richard Lewis, you're wrong on that article. It's totally nonsense. And then they wonder, what the fuck? I thought everyone would be celebrating me. Say, you have to also be right, by the way. It's a really high stakes game. If you fuck up and you have those details wrong, you might even be the bad guy. You might be besmirching someone's reputation. Or you might just be totally wrong. Like, it's also really high stakes. It ain't something you just do willy-nilly.
Well, I found that out the hard way, Thorin, because the thing is that when I was starting off as a caster alongside Squid, CS, he would never, like, he was the guy who was already 5 years into his career, and it hadn't necessarily gotten to tier 1 status. He was still tier 3, tier 2 in terms of the gigs that he had been working. He found a new duo partner, and I had never casted before, and we sort of figured things out. But alongside that, I was already doing talk shows. I was already doing not really investigative journalism, but enough so that I would basically be able to say, I know these stories from these companies about these individuals who maybe I should avoid in the future. And I was not really tight-lipped about it. And I was somebody who just, I was, you know, the guy, when we had you on for an Elo Heaven episode way back, Vu and I, we talked about the really low rates of these Snow Sweet Snow companies events, and how all of these casters were being told, don't ever talk about your compensation, which is totally breaking like European contract law, and eventually exposed all those people who were responsible for that. And okay, great. However, nothing really, first of all, nothing came of it. And second of all, it just meant I never worked in tier 2. And I hadn't gotten enough of a cachet, like you were saying, to work tier 1. So yeah, it was just over for me at that point, and I had to sort of go back to content creation and doing the other stuff that I have a great repertoire of things I like to do. But if my aspirations were to start being the next big color caster, which maybe never was in the cards anyway, I wouldn't have known. I never would have been able to do something like that, purely because I was just very quick on the draw and said, hey, these companies are doing bad things. Meanwhile, the guy who was responsible for telling those casters to never speak about their rates, he was promoted after this and sent off to some silent part of the company and then never spoke to again. So great. Glad to see that that's esports, right? So that's just how I was coming together.
There's even like an aside, which I just briefly mentioned, which is it actually sometimes sucks to be that guy. Like, you know what's coming. You're just going to get hit in the face with 1 million people who don't know you and like blue check marks and stuff. And just essentially, you're just the guy that day everyone's decided to go after. Yeah. And people who don't know you and intentionally are going to misinterpret what you said, just going to attack you for a week. Like, sometimes that sucks because half the time, this is what people won't know, is that sort of has also become kind of a role that we actively take on ourselves. We don't just do it for our pet causes. Like, one of the maddest things of all time is just, I've made this point to people and they always sort of don't get it. Because I was involved in scandals in the early 2010s where maybe I did say things that were like on the line, edgy, maybe even slightly over there. Maybe I was sort of playing with the line a little bit. People make out like every drama I had was the same. Go look at the last like 6 years of dramas, and I'm not joking. Some of them are stuff like, I defend people who openly insult me and are like pieces of shit to me like more. Now, I don't defend him on the grounds like he's a good guy. All I'm saying is, like, he didn't do what you guys said he did, and you're all making it worse than it is. Now, that point there is some sort of, like moral, pure cause of, like, you should be able to defend even your enemy if it's, like, accurate what they did or whatever. But that actually sucks, because then the joke there is, that's like, I don't mind taking shells for Semler. He's a mate of mine. Taking him for, like, more, and in that scenario, by the way, the people you do it for don't appreciate it. They'll go, oh, well, I'll be cool to this guy. They're so stupid. They must like me or something, like. So you don't even really get the benefit of it. And half the time, as you say, Scriv, to bring it back to the beginning, because you know, right, unless Richard's going to say something, maybe it's not his topic, someone doesn't care about this, it's legal, I'm just going to have to be bloody me, isn't it? That sometimes sucks. You do feel like a fucking martyr, like, really? That's why when we threaten, like, when we leave esports, I'll be worried. You all think, like, no, we won't, there'll be more casts, isn't it? It's like, yeah, that's where you'll be conspicuous, our absence, mate, is that there'll be, like, massive topics like this, and you'll be going, well, any minute now, someone's going to... And it will just go, the genie will go back in the bottle and onto the shelf. And those things they'll never blow up. And what it means, by the way, the people who are going to love it the most, this is why people are so silly to drive these people out, it will be the ESLs and the Blizzards and the Riots of the world. Yep. Mate, they'll be popping champagnes the day Richard actually retires and never writes another article. Like, it's game over at that point in time. You can hope the other people do it, but... As I said, it's a very small group of people who engage in that behaviour, and quite frankly, it's the most thankless task in the industry. You're just making people hate you, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you say, that tightrope analogy. It's really tough, and I think, especially now, because we're in this weird sort of purgatory where there's a massive field of people sort of coming up, and whether it's casters or journalists or whatever, but we're not quite fully sustainable as an industry. Where if I were a League 2 football commentator, I could still sort of make a living off of that, right? So if you want to maybe say something controversial about like Sky or whatever, you're maybe not going to work with them, but you could stick on your BBC Radio 5 Live or whatever. This is all very English football, but you know what I mean? Like lower down levels and things like that, you can still sort of make a living, which is one of the big things that, for me, it kind of frightens me a little bit, that it's sort of like, right, well, I need to get out of where I'm at the minute, because if I really was getting everything, then, and a couple years ago, but it's like a couple years ago, the rates weren't as good. So it's this weird spot of, you don't want to lose where you're at, you don't want to lose the momentum, but at the same time, there are a few things, there are a few people, there are a few decisions that get made or whatever that maybe you do want to say something about, but you can't really. So indeed, I think that every sort of industry and system, and look, man, they're across the world, across all the different conventional sports, they are fizzling out as more of this sort of big money comes in, and they're not afraid to just sort of get rid of you when you say something that they sort of disagree with or whatever. And even that, I'm sort of skirting around. You know what I mean? So it's like it's really, really difficult at the minute, I think, to fully put your feet down and not have to truly.
Like what you're saying, by the way. I get the vibe it's going the other way. Like, people think like, oh, like maybe more people are going to question like ESL, and right, it's, if anything, like I say, Richard's going to retire. I'm going to do less of it and do it for my own company. Sam's going to fuck off. He basically not in esports anymore, except by the numbers and stuff he does with me. And the joke will be the opposite, because actually the real problem is esports is at a crossroad. And spoiler, they already chose which direction they go, and the direction is all the biggest money in the world, no matter who it comes from. So the problem becomes, like, I'll give you an example. Even though I actually have an incredible amount of admiration for the stance that Vince took by actually publicly basically saying like, I'll never work with ESL in the context that they're owned by these people. Like, spoiler, just like Vince's home football club is owned by the same people, those Saudi investment group, everything will be eventually, because there's only two ways it goes. Either esports makes loads of money and you might be lucky, maybe like businessmen will just stick around. Like, essentially the lesser of two evils is bloody American businessmen and tycoons. So maybe that can happen. But if it doesn't, and I think quite frankly esports has shown no sign it's going to become profitable anytime soon, the opposite of anything, I think it actually becomes more like the opposite, because I always make this point about the Saudis who bought ESL. You know, people say that silly line, they're like, why didn't they just put more layers of abstraction? That's the entire point of the purchase. The point of sports washing is to take something you would think is horrible and maybe even immoral and wrong and put it next to something you love, and make it so that even if you think, well, they're not quite the same, they are. To support one in some ways infers the other's okay. That's an intentional brand decision. They didn't want it to be separate. They want you to know. That's why that guy who runs that fund says, I'm actually hands-on, I'm involved, because they want it to actually be. This is why people think you're making a big deal about them being from Saudi Arabia. No, literally, that the person who runs the company is directly involved with this, and they're doing it as like a market exercise for the country. By the way, when people say those apologist lines like, but they can drive that, that's what they want you saying. That was why they paid $1 billion, mate. Because here's the thing. If they hadn't bought into esports, the joke is some of them already did this. This would be the easiest donk of all time for the people on Twitter, wouldn't it? They'd all be going, I've never worked with the people like that with their human rights violations and their look at the press index of where the freedom. They'd never do it in a million years. But I tell you what, once they get involved, the joke is they're the ones saying the apologist lines now. Suddenly they're like, well, you know, in the end, isn't all money blood money? And at the end of the day, you know, like, whatever, I've got to eat as well, right? It's like, didn't you say they kill gays? Well, yeah, but I've got to eat as well. You know, like, fucking hell, like, that just shows that, like, I think the industry's going the other way, mate. Like, I actually think it's why, in a way, people like me and Richard have to sort of fade into the background. I think because essentially we can't win the battle. We're not going to turn the steamboat around and get all the money out and all the legit people come back. It's probably going to keep going the opposite way. So this might even be like the one blip in history where you can sort of address these things and still have a job. And then eventually it might just become like the unspoken thing no one says in the industry. And even the fans probably eventually will get bored of saying like, what's going on? And just go, whatever, just enjoy the ESL tournament, innit?
Yeah. Yeah. I think all it becomes is the level maybe of where like F1 is at, where it's only really the sports stars, you know, the players themselves that could possibly try and do anything about it. I know that Lewis
You're
Hamilton
simple, yeah, maybe you could say something,
spoken.
Maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe.
But even then, yeah, exactly. You don't really know where it's at. I mean, this is the thing with where esports is very different from where the sports washings come in, because it's still young enough, it's still naive enough, you know, or whatever. It doesn't have
it is. Yeah.
nearly, you know, 100 years of history or whatever, like many of the other sports. This is a great time to get in. It's got legs. It's moving up. It is indeed, you know, getting more popular year on year, whatever. But it doesn't have that sort of grounded level. And then generationally and all this kind of stuff, like people are maybe not as and on the internet, you know, it's like it's a bit harder to get fully into it and fully fight back and all that, because at the end of the day, you know, you just, like, a lot of the viewers will just watch the stream a bit muted, probably not really pay attention to the ads and stuff like that, and not interact as much with them, etc. So yeah, it's a great time from a business angle to buy in, really.
I still am shocked that we actually have people on the desk having to say, and our Air Force, Air High, whatever it was, like one-on-one,
aim high,
aim high, head-to-head. Yeah, sorry, I forgot what the call out was for that one. I'm glad you know that. Yeah, well, so no,
it's working.
It is working. So it's just one of those things where it's like, really, homie, like you're gonna be, you know, comboing that. The fact that those two, by the way, are so intertwined, it's almost as if the ESL partnership sponsorship stuff is like a weird twisted mirror for a lot of the stuff that America and the world does anyway. It's like, yeah, we got Air Force here, we got sketchy Russian betting company 1xBet here that like nobody knows what the deal is with that, and we also got Saudi Arabia. It's like it's all the world's problems, right? Very diverse, very inclusive. So great stuff. And actually, speaking of, this is a very scuffed segue, but did you guys see that the two most fuck teams of the entire circuit, Astralis and NIP, and by teams I should say organizations specifically, recently announced that in fact they do have female teams. They just came out with this announcement, both of them. So it's been a bit of a slow news week this past week, but that caught my eye purely because of the fact that we have had so many people talking about, oh, look at ESL and DreamHack and look at what they're trying to do with the Women's League and GG for all and yada, 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 which is now my favorite hashtag to look for under your
it's great,
Twitter,
isn't it?
Thorin. Yeah.
Because it just became one ironically hilarious, didn't it? Like, yeah, GG for all, except all these people getting wrecked. But yeah, fuck them, right? Lol. Yeah. Gotta break a few eggs. Like, that's what it should just be GG for all, except the few eggs you gotta break to make a human omelet or whatever. Like, fucking hell.
Except for Yemen, basically. So.
Yeah.
No, my joke on that one was like ESL used to just be all about yes men. Now it's all about Yemen, isn't it? Like whatever. Listen, it's not honest. It's honest work, but it's not great work. That's all.
Yeah.
By the way, on that topic, they actually sort of low-key wrecked me a bit on that one. Because I actually did have a video planned. I just put it too far back in the rotation. That was actually going to mock NIP on exactly that take. And it would have been legit. It's just obviously now they've got the teams, so it won't matter anymore. Because basically what I realised was, one of the things I've noticed in esports people never think about is they look at the most literal definition of what someone says, but they don't think about what it implies. Like what does that suggest about their psychology and their like hierarchy of values, how they see the world. So when that guy, Jonas Gunderson, the COO of NIP, came out when this PGL Stockholm talent announcement was made and famously made a racially motivated statement that essentially there were only white people on the something mental like that. It's all bloody white men or whatever. It's that angle, right? Basically, even though for a start off, like his angle was like there's only one non-white man. There was like 3 or 4 anyway, but that's by the by because obviously it's a stupid analysis anyway.
Yeah.
But what's mad about that is this. I remember going and looking at his org and being like, wait a minute. So the problem here is like there's too many white people, and then the other argument became, there's no women. And I looked, and they had no women in the entire org who were players in NIP. And the joke is, motherfucker, you're from Sweden as well. Sweden. Yeah. Where like the living standard is so good, there are loads of women can fuck around and play games and stuff. There's even people that all have the higher education level. Like the joke is, your country should be like the number one. That's NIP is associated heavily with Sweden. If people don't know, that would be like the number one place you'd go to look for a female CS player that could be on your team. So the joke was, even though ESL Impact's been out this whole time, it was almost like NIP is going out of their way to signal like, wait, fuck women, we're never gonna hire them, because in every other context they're calling people out for that, going like, how dare you not? What are you doing? What are you doing? And by the way, they're just talking about a pay to do like on-camera broadcast work for an event. That's not even about like building in the future esports. In this scenario, like it is wild that these teams never had it. Like I don't know how you can pretend to be all woke and stuff. Like use some of the money then. Do it. Use some of it for the cause you claim it's for. Because by the way, it actually looks very cynical now. Now what it looks like is you didn't believe in women's esports, so you didn't have a team. And then when ESL said, you know what, we got all these Saudis to just give us like loads of fucking money, we're just going to chuck it around at women in esports. You were like, can I have some of that? That just looks like you're fucking out for yourself, doesn't it? Like where the joke there is the women become the pawn in your fucked up game. By the way, spoiler, that's not a great look, is it? A bunch of men who are trying to have power and influence over the world go, is there any way we could use women as sort of like proxy warriors to beat our own? Ladies, isn't that what you were fighting against? What's going on here? Like, make your own org. Fuck these guys. There's one thing I want to know, by the way. If there's all this money in esports, it's all from good people TM who have the right politics. Why can't a bunch of women just get an awesome org together and get millions in funding for all these people who claim they would love to put all the money in? And why can't loads of the orgs in that league be run by women and have that? Exactly. By the way, it's not my take. That would be in line with what they claim to want. You notice it's nothing like that. The actual structure is just the same men run the same orgs, the same exact ones from the male one, and they just get a female team. Half the time look very cynically put together when they put the new lineup. It's one thing if you sign a team. When they make a new team, dude, it even looks like they sat down with a focus group, like, want a Spanish person, probably someone from like the Nordic region, maybe like a Russian one. It's like, dude, you're just looking like this is like a fucking boy band. This is manufactured. Like, you're just trying to get like all the fucking, I want the whole smorgasbord. Pick who you like the old thing they used to do in the 2000s with the boy band. It's like, which one's your favorite? What do you like? Like, I find the whole thing just so cynical. Like, you can't even sort of believe they're doing it in good faith. And by the way, you could be, obviously. Like I say, you could be someone where if you're a woman and maybe your main thing is having women in esports. I just don't believe the Nips and Astralis of the world do. I think they just do it for some PR and the prize money. That as well.
Indeed. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely kind of a weird one for me. I think I'd be curious to know if it ties into sort of where the Louvre agreement is as well, and sort of as
it might be something like that. Like everyone has to get one.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Because Na'Vi have also a few months ago now, but they also picked one up and whatnot. So.
Basically, in some other games, like League of Legends, it was also inferred behind the scenes, Valorant as well, that like people like Riot, because they have more control, might even do that, by the way. They might tell you, like, if you're an LCS org, you're going to get like a women's team. Also in Valorant, obviously, they have that game changes where it's like mixed gender. Yeah. So as far as I know, that is even sort of maybe even a top-down push in esports too. It's not just organically people choosing to support what they support necessarily.
I still can't believe that the Na'Vi team is called Javelins. Like,
that's actually, for real, one of the most like fucking way over the line fucking like names ever, because essentially those are actually weapons that kill men from another. Like, what are you even doing, by the way, playing into that? I find that actually outrageous. By the way, we won't make a whole side tangent on that, but if anyone ever came from outside esports and wanted to do a really crazy deep dive, spoiler, just go to when the conflict began this year and follow as many of the major figures in Ukrainian esports as you can, and you will be fucking shocked at some of the things you will see. I'm not even talking, by the way, about edgy jokes. I'm talking these people are wiling full on. Like, you would think for real, it was like this was World War III, and they were like, the other side must all die. That's like the level some of the really famous people were on. You just don't know it because it was written in Ukrainian or Russian, and it was never brought to the Western media. No one ever was willing to touch the topic. Richard like lightly touched on it in like those esports Iron Curtain pieces, but no one in the West knows this. Like, that was an area where like that whole topic, that whole Na'Vi angle, like, that got really dark, mate. That got really dark, that whole thing. It was really disturbing because I thought it would be like the simple speech. I thought we'd have the opposite approach. I think it'd be like, right, look, that's some bullshit outside of esports, but we're all in esports, aren't we? We're all together, and like, I'm not against you, you're not against. I thought it'd be that vibe, but it's turned really dark. It's gotten really horrible over there, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one because I've followed it a little bit, not so much recently, but like earlier. But Javelin, the weapon, was one of the key things that like has turned the war in the favor of Ukraine to be able to like deal with all the Russian tanks and stuff. So it's a bit of a wacky one, mate. It is a bit of a I don't know.
Ridiculous.
I don't know. But again, you can look at it from the angle of the old classic like throwing spear or whatever, and obviously it's in the Olympics and all that.
Maybe they can use that as the
timing's a bit off on that though, isn't it? That's the problem, isn't it? If they'd already had the team, it'd be whatever, wouldn't it? But
no, that is
they
true.
when they just put it together after it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I would be interested in going a little bit further on Na'Vi specifically, just because we obviously saw that Simple took his time off for like recently, and apparently was just hanging out with Boomich. Often, I forget where exactly, but it was, some faraway land while Blast was going
Dubai
on.
Or something, wasn't it?
Ones. Yeah, I believe so. And what got me about that was mostly just that, like, I know that the calendar is really crazy right now, right? That's one of the topics we'll get to at some point. And I know that, like, okay, maybe you're going to get burned out, especially if you're known for this, like, grinding mentality where you're always going to be practicing and always at the top of your game as the GOAT player of the game, number one in the world. It seems really weird to me that this is all happening. Like, there was also all the talk of, like, maybe after Boomich goes, I take a break, and, like, maybe I never, maybe I come back way later. Maybe the break is much longer. Do we have any thoughts on what this whole thing meant for Simple to begin with? Like, it feels to me like, obviously, yes, he's been dealing with the fact that his country's been invaded, but there's also the question of, like, I mean, not to say that like everybody's going to deal with that differently, but it's just weird to me that like we've got Simple over here who's been sort of like laying the groundwork for him to exit the game for a certain amount of indeterminate amount of time, and then things magically seem to be working okay with SDY instead of Boomich, and now okay, maybe he's going to stick around a little bit more. Thorin, I think you in the past have speculated that maybe because of the fact that his team's success was kind of up in the air, so to speak, maybe it doesn't make any sense as to why he would be sticking with the game if his team was just going to fall apart after their success at the most recent major. But now they're doing all right. He seems to be okay for the most part, besides this like week or two long disappearance. What do you make of the whole fact that he was even talking about taking a break or an extended leave?
Right, the most whack part of Simple's whole career is that actually he never ever should have had a chance to win a major or ever been in the number one team. Basically, if you look at how long he was far and away the best player, I'm talking just eye test, even stats sometimes. If you look at how many years he put together, like I've watched all the Counter-Strike players. That's why I actually say, I famously used to say, I'll never grant a CSGO player the status of like Neo and Get Right and Forest in 1.6, because those guys, what they were doing, they just could go like 4 years and just be the best every single month of the year, right? I also used to think, because I thought the game wasn't as good, CSGO as well, I was like, well, logically, you can't be as good as those guys. Those were like the gods. I'd say now Simple is better than all of them, because literally what he did at the level he did for how long against what, like, it's just impossible. And so if you do that right, you're actually supposed to have your career more like Nico's. It's supposed to be more like, yeah, you're still like very good, but you're not the absolute best. You had your years, like obviously for Nico, it was like 2016 to 2018. He was kind of a Simple himself back then. He could have won everything. Now, if you don't, everyone has a window, and I think the most unfair thing in esports is if you just win in your window, you're allowed to fail as many years as you want after that. Yeah. So if you're Cold Zero and that, just win in the first couple of years, you can live off that for 5 years, mate. But if you're Simple and you're like a god individually, but you don't win for 5 years, they act like you haven't even started your career. So think about that. He goes through all that fucking bullshit. He comes up against SK, he comes up against Astralis, comes up in the modern day with Gambit and these other squads. He comes up against all these teams that are better than him, better squads, better set of players, more people in the top 20, etc. Yet he's still putting in these goat years. And after all that, because he stuck with it in a way no one else probably ever will, he suddenly got the chance. Everything just came together around him, and he had the super team. He had the number one team. He was winning majors. He was winning every single LAN. Remember, they not only didn't used to lose Nuke, they used to rarely lose a map in a series. Like, it used to be a story at the tournament when someone won the map off them. The joke was, people like Heroic didn't even have to beat them. Just win a map and have a close game. That's about the best you can hope for against Na'Vi. Right, imagine you finally got everything you dreamed of, and even better, everything haters told you wouldn't have, and in fact you didn't even need, because if you're the best, why can't you just win like Cold Zero? So you suddenly get your dream, like a genie. This is what you would wish for. The pieces. You'd have Blade. So you even, by the way, you even have like the best tactical mind on your team, and the best player, and the best rookie, and the best sidekick. Fucking hell, you have everything you want, right? And then suddenly some insane external context that you could never predict, a black swan event in history, takes it all away from you. But not entirely. You've got like 80% of it, but you haven't got what you just had. And it was nothing to do with you. You didn't drop off. You were even winning still. In fact, you never were toppled. Other teams made player changes, but then this shit happened before the first tournament could even finish. In that scenario, who the fuck wouldn't be bitter? Who wouldn't be like, I'm not going back to the bottom again. I'm not even going to third again and work. Why should I play against another number one team that wins every tournament and is dominant? And then all everyone focuses on is, even though I carried my team to the final and I deserve the MVP because my numbers blow everyone out the server, everyone's going to make a case why someone on the other team should win because they won the game. Everyone's going to go, it's your fault. You didn't carry, checks notes, literally every game. Simple. Like what used to happen in my career, where the joke is I'd drop 40 kills, lose 14-16, and a fan sort of goes, right, you dropped 42. It's like, fuck this noise, right? In that scenario, I could totally understand how you'd be very bitter, resentful. Obviously, then there's not even a resolution to it. Remember, people were saying stupid shit like the Russians will run out of gas in 2 weeks. So people thought that would be resolved in like a month. It's still going on now. Like 6 months later, it's still going on. So now you're at the point where it's become indeterminate, the length. It could be the rest of your career. It could be 3-4 years. You might never be able to actually live in your country again. These are all brilliant reasons, by the way, why someone could be in a really stressed position, even though their team can still win every tournament, even though they can still be the MVP and the number one player in the world. Now, that's essentially, I gave him the best possible fucking chance there with that outline. I actually do think, though, when people are going to think, yeah, I'm just going to go in on him now because he went on your Twitter, wrong way round, idiot. Why would someone who is a fan of mine go in on me on Twitter? I know you guys don't know this. It shocks you. You think I'm lying, don't you? Simple has said to me he is literally my fan. He has asked me at events to come separately at after parties and go and talk for hours and hours about fucking Counter-Strike at an after party. I'm having a beer, you twat. I do that all day. I do that for your fucking courtesy. I do that as a favour to you. You think I'm getting off talking to a guy in broken English telling me about how he runs Molotovs on Banana? You daft twat. I could go talk to fucking Carrigan. He speaks perfect English, you moron. So in that scenario, right, someone who was a fan of mine, someone who has repeatedly tweeted at my account without me tweeting at his, someone who, spoiler, followed me on Twitter. That's why he was so upset I blocked him. Someone who actually does clearly know he had one little moment where he had an outburst because he was upset about one of his heroes being called out, and he said something silly, but because I'm not a guy who fucks around, and because I don't care how good you are at aiming in the crosshairs, I've blocked your ass, and you're out of my life now. You're gone. He can't handle that. Now that's not. It's not reverse. It's not like I made Simple go. That's someone who already was on the edge. In my opinion, that's like that's the canary in the coal mine. His tweet to me that like this guy was on the absolute edge, boys. And the problem is that's why it isn't good enough that Na'Vi can be number one and still could win the next major and could win all these tournaments. They're in the finals of most of them. I genuinely think he has been mad pissed off with how this year's gone, and the fact that there is still no resolution in on the horizon. There's no reason why Na'Vi would win everything, even though they could. It actually doesn't even seem like it's possible to become the same impossible force they were last year. So it feels fucked up. Even coming second sucks when you thought you should be first. And then I'd even say this: how unlucky do they have to get? That FaZe clan who wins all the tournaments, I think this is one of the teams that everyone else has just misread completely. They're not even a dominant team. They play someone in the group stage and almost lose, or do lose. What happens is they're just one of the most clutch teams to ever play Counter-Strike. And so the crazy thing there is Na'Vi is the best team in Counter-Strike. It's just FaZe is more clutch. And the problem is, to be the best team, you have to win the final, which is by definition the biggest clutch thing. And that's when FaZe just always, that's like activates their trap card and they win no matter what, don't they? Like this last one in the EPL was the most egregious. Na'Vi was up 2-1. They won all those miracle clutches. Like, what more am I supposed to do? And then I lose the series. So what I do think is, I think basically, like Pranogo said, that's been my speculation the whole time because it's the way he messaged it. If you go back in time to the major, the Antwerp major, right? Once they get past the quarters where he had that mad dodgy match where Electronic pulled his arse out with a fire on Nuke in the third map against Heroic. Once they made semis, because let's be real, they knew they were going to beat Ents. Half the Ents players had never even been there. Once they smashed Ents, go watch the interviews, mate. It doesn't sound like it now. Simple himself in the interviews is saying like, well, I think we are the number one team, and I think after the final we'll prove we're number one, and then we will be considered number one in the world. Second he loses, they all do this. Out comes Blade, out comes Simple. It's like, well, we had problems and there's problems with the tactics and we haven't quite updated this year. Every time things are going well, and then Simple's macking the game, he's getting the stats up, it's all going awesome, they're heading to the final, they even won one with the Blast, it just wasn't the biggest one, they're headed towards all those trophies. Remember, if they win Cologne, we're having a different conversation now. Now it's about how FaZe has dropped and Navi's on the ascendancy. So when they're doing all this, suddenly the messaging from Simple is like, I am number one, we're going to win everything, we should win everything. The second they lose, it's like, no, this is all fucked, what's going on? Yeah, because that's how frustrating it would be. He's not reacting to the actual results, he's reacting to what could be, what should be, what he wishes was the case. And so I think that whole break thing, that looks to me like either he was setting the public up for a potential, like, I dip out the game for 3 months, or the other angle is you're playing your org publicly. Maybe you're even trying to pressure them, like, yeah, you know what? Things don't go too well with the next standing, though. Maybe I just take a break, a break. And he even kept calling it my break, like it was a thing in the fucking calendar. Like we had a player break, and then at any point, it's like a fucking chance card in Monopoly. Oh, I invoked a simple break card. Like, that's not even a thing, mate. And then finally, there's that whole issue, which is in the end, it just ended up being like a few weeks where he claims it was for a visa, and he was just having fun, and it was just the group stage anyway, so who cares? So it makes it look at the end, quite frankly, like he was threatening. But because Na'Vi got too good, but not quite as good as he wants to be, he sort of was like, yeah, better just bloody play then. We might win the next major if I stick around. So actually, I have got a vibe with sour grapes. But as I say, if you put it up front all the context before the part now, where maybe he's wilding a little bit and having a bit of a tantrum, I do think some of it before is totally understandable, and none of us are in that position, so I think it would be a very, very difficult set of circumstances. And like I say, who the hell else was ever like the GOAT for 5 years, then finally got a team that could win everything? Like, it was a pretty wild scenario. So in some sense, I think he's a bit of a bitch. In some sense, I actually can empathise. I think it's fucked up what happened. If I was in that situation, I'd be mad on edge, of course.
Real quick, too, the other thing that is, I think, useful context to shade in is that they had just started to dominate on LAN when COVID hit back in 2020. If you remember the Katowice final against G2 where they stomped them. And,
it's happened twice, technically, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that, like, okay, another Black Swan event now after the first one.
Great. Oh, exactly, yeah.
He
also had 2 years of his career robbed for that shit as well, exactly, yeah.
There's a lot. I feel as well, like going even sort of further back, I would say that although the numbers maybe look better, you know, because of the caliber of the team, he definitely is. He's had a lot, right, where he was held down by one player, which was hard enough, and then it sort of started to turn into two players, and you know, and it's like I think he's had a lot to kind of deal with. The extracurricular of this year is absolutely mental and unfathomable, of course, but just career-wise, just keeping it to Counter-Strike, if, you know, he's trying to, that's the sort of professional sportsman mindset. Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a wild career for this guy, to be honest. And it is one thing to be the sort of, I'd say probably undisputed. I don't think that maybe you're a real big fan or whatever, but you would probably still be able to say that Simple's the best player to touch.
Here's the thing, even the Zywoo fans have actually given up the ghost, and here's why. I've made this joke before, but just watch. The joke was before, they would go like, well, look how Zywoo played in the finals of ESL Cologne, though. Now they go, check out this POG demo where he dropped 79 kills against nobody's like, guys, like that, look at what you're bragging about. Like, that's the fucking standard, like, because the joke is they can't just say he's better than Simple, except actually for this fucking, like, EPL. But aside from that, they sort of, even they gave it up. I think everyone's giving it up now, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, unless there's a turnaround, right? I guess that's kind of the thing. But I just wanted to add, I think it's actually an interesting sort of thought experiment to maybe go down, that there is perhaps a bit of org playing off. Because as soon as, maybe he's definitely not, and I feel like he probably wasn't the long-term plan, but as soon as, or pretty shortly thereafter, the Blast group's finishing, Hetrick has been, you know, transfer listed. So I don't know if there is a bit of trying to get rid of the replacements or what. I think that's an interesting thing. We'd probably end up spending a bit too much talking about, you know, academy teams and all that.
The thing, the key thing, in case people don't know, in case people don't get the implication, the problem Simple has is this: first game looked awesome, they got dicked and they didn't win with their replacement. But the problem is, and I'll tie this in actually. But then the problem is, Marvi won the group even without the best player in the world. So you're right, that could make you think, wait a minute, is it all Simple? And then you know what he also did? This is where people don't get subtlety. Simple wasn't there, so that should be the narrative, right? Na'Vi can win without Simple. No. He went out of his way repeatedly in multiple interviews to be like, no. What I did was, as soon as they lost, I jumped on and I was like calling and I was telling them plans, and it was really fun actually, because we were sort of learning together. It's like, fuck you weren't even in the game and you trying to take credit. That's like some shit like you're injured on the side, like, I told him how to score that goal. Like, fuck you, that's his goal. Like, that's... Dude, I had never thought about that angle, but it almost does feel like insecurity. Like, he thought, fuck it, they replaced me, really. Like, no, he hadn't really. But again, if this is someone on edge, like, you could feel threatened by that, right? And then again, if you're the org, by the way, genius move, if you bring in a young guy that's like, hey, this guy could sort of... Look, he wasn't anywhere close to Simple, in case people don't know. But we could just bring someone else in and still win without you. Well, you can't push us around with your break now, can you?
Yeah, well, it worked out perfectly for the org in that sense, especially if they end up getting, I don't know if they're going to get a buyout or not for Hetrick. Obviously, it was a limited sample size, but somebody might bite if they're trying to put together a listing. I don't know how good his English is or whatever. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, Simple's not here, but we still end up winning. And that's something that, you know, you've said this point before, Thorin, is that one of the things that you really liked about his early career is that he had to carry so ridiculously much. And to Scrib's point, too, it's like Zeus and Edward, and then maybe Flamey's inconsistent. And it took so long for Electronic to get into the roster. And then we had Guardian come back into the roster with like a really low form at some point, and Simple wasn't opping for a brief period of time. That was very short, so I'll forgive people for not remembering that part. But just like roster craziness for this guy, but he still was able to carry them into maybe a major final, and then he would lose to Astralis, right? And he'd still be able to carry into all these event finals, and yet his trophy cabinet was so empty for so long, just like his roster was so ridiculous for so long. Now that he has maybe a veritable super team of some sort, a team that really is quite powerful, especially with the way that Bit has basically not fallen off. A little bit of a dip recently, but for the most part been totally money. The fact that like, okay, now we have something, we're cooking with gas here. We don't even need the best player in the world on our team in order to win a group in this tier 1 event. Like, I know the format was fucked, but still, that's a statement. And that does make you wonder how much of a significant force Simple really is. Not to take points away from him as GOAT status, obviously. It's just that you have to think to yourself, if they actually can win against tier 1 teams that are trying to do so in a studio environment, in best of 1s, best of 3s, whatever, without Simple, without the greatest player of all time, like the rest of this team should deserve some credit. They should get some credit for that. And that's,
you know what I should actually do, mate? I know what I need to do. There was a time period where I wrote a famous article, well, maybe if you know Simple's career, where I actually wrote an article. It was a Dear Simple, open letter to Simple.
Yeah.
And I literally just explained in this article, whether it was his age like a motherfucker, I just explained to him, like, you actually are probably the most skilled player ever. You can do anything you want. You can win every tournament ever in Counter-Strike, be number one, beat all these people beating you now. But your problem is, it ain't just going to be from being good at the game. You're going to have to basically apply yourself to being a teammate, like you applied yourself to learning all the aspects of the nades and the game and the gameplay. And if you can do that, once you learn how to use those teammates, then you will be number one. Then literally none of these guys who hate on you now, none of them will be able to fuck with you. You'll get your revenge on everyone. So obviously now it looks amazing. But here's the problem. Since I don't talk to him now, because obviously fuck him, now the new take is I should do another open one. But again, this would be more for the community. Because the take should be this. That tantrum of like, I lost everything, or what the fuck, like I had everything in my palm and it's all just taken away. That's fine for like, let's say the first 3 or 4 events, maybe even the first major. I'd be mad if I lost a major when I thought I should now have gone back to, you know, all that jazz. But I tell you what, eventually you have to also just fucking dry your eyes and fucking put your hard hat on and go back to work. Yeah. What I would say is this, mate, it ain't even over. Listen to what I just said about FaZe. They're not a lock to win all these tournaments. They have to give absolutely everything to win this shit. So all you need to worry about is this. You're still number 2. Like these guys are saying, your team's good enough they can beat half the tier 1 without even you. You still got pieces, mate. You've got this young guy bit. He could get even better. You've got Electronic, by the way. He's still been good all these years as a fucking kid and a family. Like, how about you actually... I know you did it before, but you can do it again. Put up some hardship. Fucking suffer. And I tell you what, here's the cool thing. If you actually had won everything this year, they were already trying to do it at the end of last year, they'd have gone, but it was the other years that made you the GOAT. Now you've just got the best team. Like, how's Nico supposed to beat you? He doesn't have Bit and Electronic. If you won this year over FaZe with this team and the conflict, you're the GOAT, undisputed forever. No one will ever be able to fuck with you. Like, that would be my way to reframe it mentally, because that's an important thing, I think. You don't just play the games and let the results, like, throw you emotion all over. You define what your career is. You define how you're going to do it. So I told this, by the way, to other people in CS history. Just some of them listened, some of them didn't. So a famous one I always give the example of is Device. What used to happen, this is a real thing, I've told the story many times, is because in his team, it was a bunch of young players who were all really skilled. There was Device, there was Dupree, there was Cajun B, even Zipnix at one point in time was like a pretty good player, people don't know, even fragging out. So in his team, their vibe was more like a liquid, like we're all just good. And as a result, no one's the star. And like if we win together, I guess we all won, and if we lose, we all lose. And I would just tell Device, like, fuck that noise, mate. Like, I'm sorry, like Zipnix is good, but he can't do the shit you can do. You could just take over a whole game with the AWP if you want. On the Cajun B, he's going to like streaky AWP a map he likes when he's on a good CT half. You could literally like dominate the whole game in that way. Like you could be the reason your team wins when no one else can be the reason they win. And all I'll say is this. Did go on to win the most MVPs in history, basically, after I told him that. But a few years later, the problem is some of them don't listen like that. I went to the Elisias of the world and tried telling them the same thing, but in a different way. I tailored it to every team. With them, I told them, here's what you need to do. You have to keep the stars together. So like you, Twists, and Naf should probably play together forever. Figure that out. Listen, it's not always going to be great. One of you is going to be in a slump. But figure it out, because you don't want that guy going to the other team and being your rival and beating you, by the way. And then the other thing is, you're also going to have to basically acknowledge that you have choking issues and get people to kick you up the arse. Don't get in a coach who's the yes man. Don't bring in players that are your mates and are really comfy. Being comfy is the end for you, mate. You need to learn how to play when you're not comfy. You want a guy in there, by the way, an arsehole. That's why I actually thought Stewie 2K was a good addition. If people don't know, Stewie 2K, Cloud9 and Team Liquid were like two teams where never the twain shall meet. They were totally different philosophies. Cloud9 was the like, we just fuck, it's like NA, we just fuck around and buy deagles and oh shit, headshot this guy. Lol, fucking Euro pause. It was all that shit. That's why fans loved them. Team Liquid were trying to be Israel. It's like, oh, we're like the guys who study the game and did the great strat. And everyone's like, who gives a fuck you lost, you fucking loser? Just get back to study hall. Like, they needed, if anything, a bit more sort of like fierceness. They needed a bit of fucking spite, a bit of fire in the belly, didn't they? So if I were them, by the way, I would have been going a different route on some of those moves. But sadly, as you see, this just shows how some people go and they get it eventually. Some people never do.
Yeah, all aspects, to be fair. Like all I'm kind of thinking, it's like the numerous sort of, I guess, each individual kind of star and sport and the best of the best type thing has to maybe have that first initial obstacle where it's maybe themselves, right? It's maybe kind of, Simple, a little toxic when he was a bit younger, and all that kind of thing. And that sort of sounds like sort of what you're getting at with Device and with Simple, and speak to them and figure this out. And then, some indeed maybe not quite taking it to heed. And then the other is kind of the sort of circumstantial, maybe the loss of like a family member that was their, soft coach or whatever, or the loss of a key player or something like, a key partnership or whatever it is. And you have to reinvent or refigure. And again, with us being a really young industry, we've not seen those types of tenures come in because maybe the money isn't quite there. The pro career sort of dries up. I've done a fair bit. I'm happy with the competition that I've completed. So I'm going to go stream, or whatever, right? And we've not really had that same kind of long period. Young kid comes up, looks really solid, wins a bunch of stuff. Simple's still relatively young. And now we've got the next level, the next thing that you've got to get through. And I will be really interested because, it could be a time period where we could maybe leave the door open, and who knows, maybe now it'll be Zywoo, teams coming together a little bit, they have the upswing again, and maybe he can get his major, and then he can get his next major, and then he, and all that sort of stuff. So I think we're at an interesting point in Counter-Strike history in terms of who, I guess, will be the greatest player ever. We've got who is the greatest player ever at the moment, but that's not a sure thing for the full history of the game,
If you see what I was sort of implying there, one thing I wish I could change in Counter-Strike, in fan culture, and even analysts, because I think analysts, too much of the time, analysts think, I'm going to tell people what they want to hear, so they become a moron like all the fucking fans, and they think they have to spit the same takes, etc. One of the things I wish I could change tomorrow is I want people to judge star players in Counter-Strike teams like you judge drivers in Formula 1. You don't really look at the fucking final places and go, oh, the third guy, he must be better than everyone who finished behind him.
True.
What's the car like? What's the crew like? What's the teammate? Who's in his ear? What's his coaching? How fast what's all the equipment in the car? The brakes good? Did he bad time? Now the point there is in the same way as each driver has their own unique circumstances, and you judge them relative to those expectations. That's why you can have the best car come second and you're a loser. That's why, though, if you're like Michael Schumacher in that Benetton, you're a god. You shouldn't even be able to win the Formula 1 and you're winning the whole constructor. That's mental, mate. That shouldn't even be possible. So I wish people did that with stars. Because if you notice, it scuffed every career narrative. Like the narrative years ago is like Cold Zero just understood Counter-Strike and Nico and Simple were just morons. Then later on, it's like Device just must know everything about the game. But what doesn't Zywoo get? It's like, it's not like that, you idiot. You have to ask what circumstance, what coach did they have? What background did they have? What teammates did they have? By the way, even the country you come from, some people are like locked for who can join their team. Like, by the way, I've always said that I will always give Nico an extra get out of jail free card. I come from fucking Bosnia. Sure. It doesn't come from Denmark or France or Sweden or something. So if people did that, we'd have way better conversations. Be way more interested as well. Like, for example, I don't really think Zywoo's worse than Simple because he doesn't win in Vitality. It's about how he plays in Vitality. Like, I would never be that angle. So I wouldn't want, just because I'm a Simple guy, I wouldn't want people to put Zywoo down. In fact, if you notice, that's one of the most annoying things. People tell me that you fucking hate Zywoo. Then when the end of last year comes, I'm one of the only people like, you probably should be number 2 though, right? And everyone's like, what are you talking about? He's trash. Get him out. He's like 5th. Zeros, but you know what I mean? Like, so the joke is, like, I don't think people are fair in that way. We've got to look at like the context of how you play, not just the raw numbers can't tell you who's better.
I do have a point to make about Zywoo, as we keep calling him. The thing about him, to me, is
he calls himself that. You said that like I invented
the technical. So
what you
French,
mean is, you mean Zywoo, the person whose name you're going to fuck up. Yeah, go ahead and fuck up this guy's name. Go on.
Yeah, so Zywoo, anyway.
There you go.
Was doing the rounds. Obviously, the discussion point is always like, is he, how good is he stacking up to Simple? I think that narrative, we've all talked about this before, but it's kind of gone by the wayside. Nobody's really saying, oh yeah, he's definitely a contender now. It's more that he's obviously a breakout talent, the superstar of the team, and that's great. And now he's got some backup with Spinks. But I'm curious about how he's been used in his teams. This is another sort of metric you were talking about. Well, how's the car? How's the crew? Who's in his ear? That's a sort of similar vibe that I get when I'm analyzing Zywoo, is that it's like, okay, it's really interesting that he was in a different system when Alex was IGLing, and there's that immortal interview where, nobody notices who's throwing the flashbangs for him or whatever. But there's an element of truth to that, where it's like, obviously he's being set up for success. Apex takes over, maybe different players come in and slot in next to him and they try different things, and he slumps. He's not as good. He's not as stable. He's not as consistent. He's maybe missing a few more shots, or he's not as comfortable. Something's missing. He's off his game somehow. And it's seemingly directly integrated to the fact that he actually doesn't have the opportunity to play the way that he used to play, the way that he's used to playing. And we also see that he pops off in FPL all the time. Okay, whatever. A lot of superstars do that. It's weird to me that he can do so well in so many different circumstances there. But it's like when push comes to shove and his infrastructure is different, his team cohesion is different or challenged. That's where we've seen him have the biggest dips in his career. And that for me was always the death knell in the argument of, oh, he's going to be the GOAT or he's the best player. It's like, well, he's the best player under very particular circumstances, maybe. And with Simple, it's like, okay, we've seen him play tons of teams. Nico, same deal. Seen him play tons of teams, tons of different structures under, different IGLs. Obviously, Simple went to Liquid for a brief period of time and was very, very successful. Well, maybe not very successful, but successful, especially considering a North American dominant squad. It's like the accomplishments just don't stack up. Not only is Zywoo really new relative to Simple and Nico, but he's also doing so under, he's had his success under very particular conditions that I don't think you can say the same thing at all for Nico especially, but also for Simple. So, is this something that you've yourself thought of, Thorin, as far as like a way to break down the rivalry, if you will, between the two players?
The joke is, I actually think the reason why I get so annoyed at Zywoo fans is then they don't, first of all, they obviously don't have the eye for it. They're just casual fans. And maybe you have to remember, this is probably one of the most annoying things about interacting with fans. They don't have like a thing on their account that says like started watching in 2017.
Yeah.
They just all talk like they were there 21 years like me. They'll tell me what Forrest was like. I told this story before when I was literally stood behind Forrest looking at his monitor, watching his hand move like, you can't possibly tell me shit. I'm like Kanye West at 2005. You all can't tell me nothing. So like in that scenario, right, you also don't know what they don't know. So maybe the Zywoo fan only started watching in 2019. Maybe he's French and that was when French CS got back to the top. So I understand why that guy thinks he's as good as Simple. Not least because, by the way, they even almost set it up to make him look better. Because as you said, Simple's coach came in and went, yeah, no more for you, mate, onto the Krieg. Going. Like, so he actually crippled him a little bit for a few months. He sort of made it so he couldn't be the dominant player because the AWPers were the dominant players at that point in time. That's why everyone wanted Nico number 2 last year, because as a rifler, it should be impossible to do that. So my problem is this, right? I've never thought the eye test checked out that Zywoo was better than Simple. Look, it might check out that Zywoo might be better than everyone else in Counter-Strike. That's totally fine. He is a fucking unbelievable player. But I actually think he actually hasn't even reached his full power level. I think there's one level higher he could go. And I think the reason he hasn't is exactly because since he came in as this very... You don't realise they were so different. Simple just smashed into the CIS scene and you had to take him or he'll just fuck you up every time at CIS lands. In fact, he was a dickhead and you have to sign him to your team because he's 3 times better than whoever your star player is, no matter how cool they are. So that's how he came in the scene. Zywoo came in like this precious little baby. Shh, he's sleeping right now. Oh, let's put him down. Carefully set the temperature right. Right, MBK, you're going to back him up over here. RBK, you're over there, mate. Apex, you're going to go in first over here. 4th guy, we just always fuck the 5th guy for some reason in this team. You just get no start. Fuck you. You're the reason he loses. Right? It's like they set it up like that. And as you say, they're very carefully flashing, put him in position, always in the best CT spot. Like, the problem I have is this. You know, the problem with the Simples and the Nikos is they get that rep of like, they got a big ego, haven't they? They want things their way. Tell you what, these guys know better than anyone how to dominate Counter-Strike with their exact way. They're not an idiot. That's like a striker saying, get me the ball, it's I'll score. But it's like Alan Shearer or fucking like Ronaldo. It's like, yeah, they're going to score. If maybe listen to them, give them the ball like that. Now, the problem is they get the rep that they're selfish. And you always give praise to the unselfish player. I've made this point in the past. That's because by default, young guys who are playing an ego shooter are all going to be selfish. They all want to carry. So what we do is, from the coaching staff to the analyst desk down, we all praise unselfishness is the best team quality. We say you be unselfish, you make space for yourself, but you don't do that if you're the god player. If you're the god player, you say the opposite. You actually tell people for real, give me all the resources. You do what I wanted Device to do. Be like, actually, I am the best player, but to do it, I need these things. I need this spot, this thing, this flash. You have to maybe hold this shit angle. I get the vibe, because Zywoo came in and they were all way more tenured players. They were legends of Counter-Strike surrounding him. He came in and his identity was, I'm the kid who frags out in this team. That's my position. If he actually, for real, got a bit of that selfishness, because you've seen all the interviews, they initially praised him, like, you're just unselfish. But then they even the Apexes of the world started to say stuff like, maybe, sometimes he wouldn't always ask for something in the game, though. Maybe he'd just say, yeah, I could do that, or I'd give up something. I actually want him to limit test. I want him to do the opposite, be selfish, and be like, actually, give me everything I need. And you know what? If you do it, here's the responsibility side. I'll carry. We'll win all these matches. Because if he did that, that's when we'll find out if there's the Simple Nico level. Because essentially, I don't even know if Simple and Nico always would have been like that. Like we said, they had very tough circumstances. They basically had some like fucking Bane in Batman Dark Knight Rises, like story that had like the joke is if they didn't become the players they were, you'd have never heard of them. If they were just toxic and tier 2, they'd be like Esperanto, you wouldn't even remember their name right now. But because they were these god players who had to battle through every obstacle, that then they got to the top, it's really satisfying. I think Zywoo, if anything, was almost a bit too pampered when he came in, and it was all just a bit too comfortable. In fact, we never blamed him ever for losing. Everyone blamed the fuck out of Simple right up until the day he won. No one ever blamed Zywoo because the logic was he's like 17 and he's still carrying all these guys, and they were supposed to be the winners. So I almost feel like actually we haven't necessarily done Zywoo a favour. So I think the day that he actually sort of gets a bit of balls and actually starts to just tell people like, this is my team, this is how it's going to run. It's great if you want that spot and you want to do that, but watch what I'm going to do with it. Because, you know, one of the things I always thought was genius that Simple did. Simple's done so many things in his career, by the way, that are utterly counterintuitive. It's why I never actually say they're wrong. I just say it was a bad call. It's aged badly. When all those analysts in 2017 were like, maybe Guardian should up. Maybe Simple actually loses you the game with these aggressive pushes sometimes. Look, I actually think that he was working on something and they didn't see it there. But I get why in the short term they were like, look, just get rid of those mistakes, basically. But the joke I always say is, it's like, because he just kept doing that, he then showed us that that's just a new way to play Counter-Strike and he's just better than all the rest of us. And actually, we're wrong. And because of his skill set, that's actually his game sense. What looks to us like a bad position is an amazing position for him because he's Simple and he knows he can get that kill. So in a similar sense, like, I actually do want these players, I want them to be in this position now where they have everything. Because I think one of the most genius things Simple ever did was at the end of 2020, before he got the lineup with Bit, was when he used to do those nuke CT games where he just took over the whole map on CT side, right? That is literally the consequence of a story 5 years earlier, guys, where he was a dickhead and he used to say to teammates like, that's not how you hold that spot. Take the spot from them in a scrim, frag out and go, that is how you hold that spot. Now, that's just being a dickhead. But the joke is, that mentality, as fucked up as it seemed, of like, I could always hold that better. So when he actually applied that, like, wait a minute, actually, my team's flawed right now. We shouldn't win these tournaments. You know what? I am going to hold that better. Or Nuke, right? I'm just going low now. You're the covering upper for me. Right? I'm going to go ramp this time. You're covering up. By the way, no other team would ever run that way. You wouldn't even let them do that. They would ruin every other player on the team, potentially. He did that and was just carrying the fuck out of every one of these Nuke games. Go watch them. Late 2020, autumn to December. These are the most amazing games you'll ever see. It's one man, like some sort of chess master, just beating a whole team. It really is one guy. Yeah. But the joke is, like, if you're a nice guy, you'd never even conceive of making a claim like that or saying, like, hey, you, hey, NBK, give me your spot, you twat. You're just some washed up player, aren't you? But in some fucked up way, when you're as good as they are, I actually almost think it's needed if you want to access like the Super Saiyan level 7 or whatever.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's something that I kind of tap into as well, where sort of you need that kind of killer mentality, right? I think all the great players of a generation across numerous different sports, most of them generally tend to have it, unless they're in a generation where, you know, the ilk of players or drivers or, you know, quarterbacks or whatever are maybe not as strong. You know, you are the top 0.001% of people that are doing the thing that you're doing, unbelievably talented. You know, genetics get in there. It's like there's probably some people who work harder than you, but they're just not going to get it because they don't have the muscle build up, or the reaction time is probably, you know, a key one in Counter-Strike, right? You've worked insanely hard. You've outworked a bunch of people. You've got a bit of luck on your side maybe to get noticed in certain places or whatever the fuck. And that is kind of the extra, like 5-10% that I think you need to get over the line. And I think it is a really key point. Like, you know, Zywoo, he's a bit of a sweetheart, isn't he? Like, he's funny, all the memes from the Facet Major and all this, and I don't think he's quite hit that kind of level. And I don't know, I feel like maybe he's missed the window a little bit, because now he's going to be in an environment where Magisk and Zonic are, I would say, very vocal, and probably they want to decide where the resources are going. Zywoo's not really had his moment of playing with those teams and playing with Vitality throughout the COVID era and being like, you know what, I am sick of losing, and comes up with the way to change it around. I think also as a player, it's kind of an interesting conversation to have with, so for me, it'd be like Simple, Nico and him, where maybe Cold as well, but I definitely think that Simple and Nico are just insanely it just feels like very, very sort of the perfect way to play their roles, right? Whereas I've always felt that Zywoo has this kind of factor to him. It can maybe be a bit more exciting. You don't quite know what he's going to do in a round, but I think that he has a more explosive and like idiosyncratic kind of style, similar to Yekindar, we could say as well, right? Would maybe be the Nico version in terms of rifling. And I think that playing that kind of style can be very hard to keep up at the very highest level consistently. And also it maybe gets you to a point where you perhaps are a bit more readable once the tape has been watched, as they say, behind the scenes. So I think that it might need somewhat of a change. And we've had this conversation on the show as well, Pronogo, where that Vitality roster, throughout 2019, I don't think that many of those players around him were also that great. They were towards the end. They were maybe a little bit overrated because Alex, for me, I think we'll maybe go back and see what is up. But I think if he doesn't get that Vitality gig, he doesn't get Cloud9, he doesn't get, he doesn't keep moving, and he was kind of really helped out. So things like that, it's maybe the super simple way of looking at it, but good player, shit team is perhaps as well what really helps him out in that kind of era with boosting where he's at. But we'll see, because now is the time. I will also say that throughout the COVID era, they had some really interesting decisions when it came to players, and then when 6-man rosters, and then they had a decent player in Nivera, but they kind of let him go and all this and couldn't really tie it down, and then Kyojin and Masuta just really not it for me. So we'll see. Now feels like the time. This team's maybe starting to come together. It's one Pro League group. Pro League groups are often flashes in the pan, so we'll see. Maybe give it to the end of the event itself. But now would be the time for me, yeah, indeed, for Zywoo to kind of get himself back in that conversation of being one of the best players in the world. Because I don't know. I feel, Exile outplayed him, in my opinion, over sort of that COVID era. You can maybe even argue that he's in a bit of an area where the likes of Searson and things can carry out and do as much as he can for the team. So yeah, it's a really interesting conversation where Zywoo's at the minute.
Yeah, for context, we're recording on the day that Searson basically had like a career low in his EPL game. But it's all right.
I have not caught that game yet. I was out all day, so that's my excuse. But there you are.
No, yeah, that's fine. So the point about like one of the really interesting things is that this is like the iron is hot if Zywoo wants to really go for it, but there's so many factors in his team that I'm not sure that it'll work out. So one, weakest top 20 of like a long time at this point. Like we have Astralis in the top 5. I think Liquid's number 3 or something crazy according to HLTV. Obviously this is just according to HLTV, but a lot of the community thinks that this is a legit ranking and maybe hasn't realized that it's actually a little bit, Frankenstein right now, and it's just all stitched together. For me, the fact that the field is so top heavy and that it's like FaZe, Na'Vi, who else wants to be number 3? It could be this new look ENCE. It could be Cloud9 when they start playing games again. It could be Vitality if they track well. It could even be G2 somehow. Probably won't because Hooxi. But if you're looking at the whole field, it's like there's so many opportunities here for me to take scalps, to build myself up as this Vitality squad, right? To build myself up as a superstar for this Vitality squad and really make us a contender to the point where maybe there are a top 3 set of teams that can win any trophy any time throughout the entire calendar year if we're really good, if we keep well. And there's a potential to theoretically even usurp some of these other teams. We talked about FaZe being more clutch than dominant. We talked about Na'Vi being, maybe they just don't go to all of the events because of the geopolitical reasons. Maybe they're just not going to field simple all the time. Who knows what's going to happen with them? They seem a little bit more on lock unless they face FaZe. But, Vitality could get into that conversation. The problem is, now they lost their French majority, obviously, with Masuda leaving the team. The question that I have is whether or not, obviously, the Spinks is a fine pickup. He's a phenomenal talent, one of the breakout stars of last year. I'm curious as to whether or not this is like a, not necessarily deliberate plan, but it seems like it will have the effect of now that there's no French dominant force, there's no, French complete overhaul of the team or whatever. We've seen the Danish duo come in plus Zonic. Like, okay, now we see that this team is more Danish than not. Is this a deliberate thing? Like, are they going to be taking more of the pressure, calling more of the shots? Do we know that Magisk and Dupree are considered, like, do they think of themselves as past their prime? Do they think of themselves as maybe they're more on the supportive end of the bucket?
Almost no player ever thinks that, by the way.
Right.
The joke is, if you sat down for real, those Evil Geniuses 5 players that started this year on the squad that have been so maligned, and you injected them with a truth serum, they'd all tell you that lineup will work. Like, give us time. We won it. Some of us won a major. We were all good. Like, I've been in Valorant. They'd all have reasons. The real problem is no pro ever seems to have a good sense of actually where they're at. It's why you'll notice the rare few who have a good sense of it, like the Carrigans of the world and the NBK. That's why I fuck with these guys super heavy, and why I always want them on my content, because they can actually talk about the game. If you notice, one of the reasons I think desks suck when pro players come on, it's because immediately everyone just starts giving him a foot rub and fucking blowing him. It's like, how about actually, if you disagree, just say I disagree with that? Because remember, for all you know, this player only sees the game he plays, or the occasional match on TV, or he's having a beer while he's watching it. Like, he might even be studying the game like you. Like, put it this way, when I get into a player like Spinks, for example, when he was coming up, I'll just go and find all those POVs and just watch like 20 games on Mirage. Like, I'm gonna have a way better sense of someone who just played and every now and then interacted 4 times in the map with him, and one time he headshot. I'm like, yeah, he's pretty good. Like, what the fuck do you know, mate? Shut up, let me talk. So in that scenario, like, I do feel like sometimes people go way too far with that, mate. That's why, if I had to guess, especially because of that story that at the end of last year, they were like, we're a package deal. You have to sign Dupree, Vegas, and Zonic, motherfucker. Yeah. And I've heard it wasn't for cheap either. That implied to me, they really did think, like, we're the core. You can add your Zywoo to our... I did get that sort of vibe. Now, listen, they might have been 100 a bit now, and I'm sure they want to keep those fucking salaries, so maybe they're going to make it work. But yeah, by the way, spoiler, I always knew they were moving away from the French line. My joke when they made the lineup was, Masuta, you better have the next best 6 months of your fucking career, mate, because there's logically no reason you have to be there. Then, spoiler, your next Apex, yeah, you did great all these years, but if you're Dupree and Magus can fucking Zywoo, and Zonic, by the way, doesn't want to get fired, you're going to start thinking if they don't win soon, maybe IGL swaps the next one. And again, doesn't have to be French. So, like, I think they're definitely, that's the good thing, by the way, I actually think about both G2 and Vitality, though. What makes them different from other teams, why you shouldn't bail on them completely, is even if these lineups don't work, because they're purely international teams with a bunch of good pieces, even when the team doesn't work, you can just rejig it. You can put another one in, you can swap it around, you can bring a different coach. Like, it's not the old world. This isn't like obviously the worst thing about 2021 was, it was like, there aren't any more French players. We've literally got a guy only famous for YouTube clips. That's what we're going to. So at that point, if you don't know, I've heard in interviews, I'm almost certain I'm remembering correctly, that they implied either the org Vitality or Extaz himself already wanted to go international, that was like a thing they wanted to do ages ago, and it was maybe the players, for obvious reasons, who wanted to battle against it. So I get the vibe, like, these teams, the whole point, these are just going to be like FaZe clans. They're going to be international teams going forwards. The joke is they're going to have all the money, so it's like Premiership football. Yeah, not every lineup works. Like, everyone's laughing at Man United on the seasons it doesn't work. When they have the seasons where it will, or a Chelsea gets the right players, when they can spend as much as they can spend, eventually you're going to strike gold. You just are. You've got more people digging in the ground, as it were. So I think eventually all these teams make it. It's just when and with what combo of players, which, by the way, is why all the onus goes back on them players. It's like, listen, mate, we might be great at the end of the year. Will you be here? I don't know if you will, mate. That, by the way, the really dodgy one becomes, what if Dupree and Magus ever turn against each other? Then it gets fucking spicy, doesn't it? And there is that whole Zonic thing everyone keeps trying to ignore, because it's the fucking elephant in the room, which is this team's been trashed for a team that has Zonic as a coach.
Yes.
Eventually, someone's going to have to pay the piper for that, and it's going to either be Zonic or some other player of the team.
Yeah,
I felt the same way about Extaz in G2 during the Alexi B stint too. It's like, this guy's storied from his time on Vitality. Where is the success? I was ready to give him plaudits and say, look, he was able to get Zywoo working, obviously a phenomenal talent, but he's able to make sure that the team structure worked well. He's obviously like behind Apex during the IGL transition and stuff. It's like, this is crazy, good stuff, man. Let's see what you can do with an international lineup. Oh, and they're gone. You know what I mean? Like, all right, apparently there's this conflict you guys can't resolve between IGL and coach. Why would a tier 1 coach who's, you know, obviously maybe he's not worked with a lot of rosters, but enough, he's found enough success at tier 1. Why can't he find success with this guy? Like, unless you have no stock in LXCB as a fan or as an analyst, there's not really any reason why XS should have such a disagreement, right? Like, there must have been something really crazy that went down behind the scenes there that we're just not familiar with, right? So I don't know, that I felt the same way, and the fact that Zonic has mostly skated by at this point, despite the fact that his team has had really big cohesion issues too. It's like, you can't get your team on the same wavelength. It's like one of the biggest things that I thought Zonic was responsible for. You know what I mean? So it's really out of character for a Zonic coached roster, I think, to look this lost in the middle of their games. Now, they have looked a bit better now, but I don't know how long that's going to track.
By the way, I just appreciate, because I love when things are like they're almost like self-satirical, but without sort of having the awareness. I love that the one thing everyone in G2 can agree on is that, look, they have every possible problem. Everyone's had issues. Even Nico's had problems with form. They've had problems over here. The placings aren't what they should be. They didn't go as deep in the majors they should. No one knows with X-Stars. Does that work? Does it not? Were they the right signings? Is Monacy actually going to be good enough? Should they have gotten JKS? Is Hooxi going to break the team? They can disagree on every single thing. Everything's possible. There's only one thing they can all agree, almost like some sort of Soviet fucking show trial style mantra, which is just that Nico's not to blame for any of it. The only one thing we know for sure, and everyone to a man, almost in like a cult in a way that you've been, how many fingers, Nico? Five. Nico says 5, so there must be 5. I see 5, big brother. Like, that in itself, by the way, becomes conspicuous. It's like, why is no one ever pointing him out? Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean he actually did anything, by the way. But again, in a team scenario like that, like, that's already a concern. That's the one thing we agree on, is it can never be his fault. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, that's a mess, that team. That's a mess, mate.
They're leaning into the memes, but Scriv had a comment the other episode where he's like, you know, if you're going to lean into these kind of jokes, I hope you one day prove me wrong. Prove the joke's wrong. And it's like, yeah, man, they're not doing it yet, so...
No, it's like when they try to do that meme, like, Lord, we lose every final 0-3. It's like, that's not actually that funny anymore, because you have lost every final 0. You know, it was hilarious when you did it twice, because it was just a meme, wasn't it? But yeah, after about like 4 or 5, it's like, I'd really just probably start looking into what you do in finals. Like, I don't know if this market approach is working, you know, making you look like a dickhead almost, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I really like the point on the international lineups and stuff, though, just to sort of, you know, give a thought on that. Because I think as well, from like a business angle, we talked about this a little bit. It's like, and it's not a controversial or, you know, original opinion or whatever, but at the minute in esports and trying to build up those orgs, fans tend to follow the players rather than, you know, following the organization. Sure. So
yes.
I think that it's definitely a way that, you know, you can pull a player in, different nationalities. You've got kind of Vitality are a little bit, maybe not quite as deep as Astralis are in Denmark, but it seems like they've got a few stores and whatnot around France, etc. And then it's kind of as well, I think, CS, the way that it's opened up, you can have we're established as a French organization, and then as far as I'm aware, I think they're sort of like in the tier 2 of League of Legends. Their team is French, plays in the French league, and now it's like in CS where we want to be a championship winning team, we can start making those moves around. So yeah, and I don't know, I've said a few times, I think there's still a move to be made in the Vitality squad. For me, either Dupree or Apex kind of feels like, if you're doing that pure sort of numbers vibe, because and it just sort of seems like Apex obviously is still very into it and, you know, animated as we all love him for and all that kind of shit, but Dupree just it feels a bit flat sometimes when I've seen him talk and all that. So yeah, I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan when it came together. I think on sort of the coaching angle, we're really starting to see now, you know, what sort of coaches are worth their chops. Are we going to look back in a few more years when it's sort of fizzled out a bit and maybe we have a few of the Astralis greats and all that kind of retiring or finding their way and trickling down into, you know, the tier 2 of Danish Counter-Strike? Are we maybe going to look back and be like, were they just so ahead of the curve, ahead of the field and all that? Is it more down to a nut that they cracked when it comes to just how sound they were with utility usage, and maybe indeed that system Counter-Strike, which was not really, outside of maybe existence teams, which even then existence teams did more executes. You know, it wasn't necessarily like a system team. It was more the fact that it was like they have set executes that they go for, and you know, they'd pull those off really well, and then they'd maybe work around, you know, those executes with a missed smoke or a slightly off smoke or someone creeping through or whatever. And Astralis, it felt like, were the first real kind of drilled and so many different options, so many different contingencies and conditioning and all that, which is only really a phrase that has started to come in a bit more into the mainstream of people watching the game, I'd say in the past sort of year or so. Something that Launders seems to talk about quite a bit, which is cool. But, you know, the conditioning angle is maybe something that people will miss out with the Astralis. So, yeah, I'm really, really interested to see whether we view these teams and these coaches especially as actually, were they just right place, right time? Are they as good as it seems? You know, can they, again, come back from the adversity and all this kind of stuff? Because I think that it's a really, really trying time for the massive break that we've had with the pandemic, where it's like, we have had some of these. We don't know, really. Astralis was starting to fall off a little bit as that 5-man roster towards the start of 2020 and whatnot. We don't know if they could have overcome that hump or if this fucking huge, massive tidal wave, and all that kind of stuff. But now it's set up a different narrative where it's like you have had the huge obstacle. It's like Device has had a few more. Is he coming back? Dunno. Glaive, Zip seems in the mud, but Vu on our last episode said that apparently 1v4'd in the RMR to save their bacon. It was the only reason. And get them through. Yeah, so
they would have actually failed if it wasn't for a vintage clutch. So.
Right, so there you
go. For whatever that's worth, he finally earned a bit of his payment.
But yeah, are we going? But especially
by the way, there's another Zywoo level fucking Zywoo and a pug thing. So you've gone from can you believe this support player has a 1.18 ratings, the MVP of a LAN, to look at this 1v4 he won against absolute nobodies to keep them alive in a BO1 in round 3. What are you? Fucking hell, guys. You listen to yourselves. By the way, you actually made me think of a take, though. I'm actually burning what could be entire videos of takes here with these things. But luckily, nobody's going to watch this anyway. This is sort of if you're a comedian going and doing those fucking small clubs or whatever. It's not the special, is it? I still save all the good material for the special. So one of the angle I've thought of is this, because no one's thought of this angle. You know what people do is, cause Zonic right now is failing on his arse, same as Glaive is. Well, in the same way, cause Carrigan took off. Even though it's funny, I was the one making this case forever. I don't actually necessarily know I would vote Carrigan to go to IGL. It's still a debate to me. It's more like it's just a really interesting convo, and it got even more interesting this year. Yeah, but because of that, cause Glaive sucks, it means Carrigan now gets to catch up because they're not letting Glaive keep going in the race, right? So the same thing happened with coaches. Cause Zonic was shit. They were like, is Blade the greatest coach of all time? And I was like, no, because here's the problem there. You're all conflating when he was an in-game leader with when he's a coach. He's only done it with one team, and at this point, let's be real, when they were really good, let's say 6 to 9 months, maybe 2 years for being an elite team. That's not GOAT material. I'll tell you, the guy who's Zonic failing on his arse with super teams is fucking catching up in that race if you're actually a CS fan. It's my boy Zews, the Brazilian Zeus. Think about this. You've just seen Sonic had the greatest team of all time. Then he gets a fucking amazing set of players, by the way. Some of the greatest players ever, absolutely on his arse. Here's what my man Zeus did. He came in with the first Brazilian team to ever become #1 in CSGO, won back-to-back majors with them. Then after, by the way, the whole time you think fucking TSM and Fnatic and Na'Vi, these are all trying to beat these guys. They're all trying to study them, figure out what they're doing. Then he goes off, leaves their team. Do you imagine how cocky he'd have to be to leave? He went and became a player in Immortals, remember, it didn't work. And then after that, did they bring him back into SKLG? Did they? Fuck. I've heard behind the scenes they didn't even think they needed him. Spoiler, they bring him back years later when he beats that ass. Because he goes to Team Liquid. Now, you're all going to go Team Liquid's a great squad. Cause of him, you idiots. Before him, they were streaky. They'd have the tournaments where they were good. They had to be carried by Twists or Simple or Elise. When he came in, his first proper year with the real squad in 2018, not stand-ins or shit, his amazing full year, he only had an NA team, the clear #2 in the world. And by the way, they were beating Navi's ass and Simple every fucking time out the gate. They just couldn't beat one team, the greatest team of all time. Then after that, cause a classic thing that year that everyone forgets was almost every time Zeus played those SK Gaming guys, he put them in the fucking dirt. Go look, mate, he had an insane record. I think at one point he had some record he won 20 times and they won 4 or something. Tell you what, that'll humble you. And that's why at the end of that year, people forget this. It wasn't that Liquid kicked them out. They chose to leave. Zeus and Taco, because let's be real, here's what happened, boys. Cold Zero fallen along, hey, maybe we didn't appreciate what you did, man. Maybe we should, team up and have a last dance. Because these motherfuckers have been playing the same game for about 5 years and you all don't even notice it. It's mate, at this point in time, turn on the bloody lights. Let's look who we're dancing with and all go home. This is a fucking bad night at a nightclub or something, mate. So when they did that, he came back in the team. Now, people will even forget this. You're all going to go, Thorin, why are you bringing up fucking MIBR? That was the team that failed. Oh, yeah, at the first major with MIBR, he got them top 4. Go look that up. Go look that. You didn't know that, did you? Everyone forgets that top 4, mate. He got that lineup that was so whack that year with Phelps and with Taco back and Cold Zero still there and Fallen and Fur. They came top 4 in the major under Zeus out the gate. After that, by the way, they fired him after that when it didn't work out and the team was garbage. They got Yanko. Oh, it's the other way around. Yanko was before. Then, the last detail, people forget this. At the time, it didn't mean anything. It was online competition and NA was weak, right? When he became the coach of EG, they shit-stomped NA for 3 months solid and were just every fucking time to all of the top teams in NA. They were like beating them every single time. Team Liquid, Gen.G, all of them, every single time. Now, you're going to go, it was just online play and it didn't work out. That same lineup became one of the worst Counter-Strike teams probably ever the next year when he was gone. Like, all I'm going to say is this. The joke is he is the only coach at the elite level that has been dropped into 3 totally different scenarios and just brought the absolute best and near, like, best possible results you could ever hope for. Now compare what Zonic did, what fucking Blade did. Like, these guys have done it once and in a very specific way. So that doesn't mean Zeus wins. But I tell you what, when you put the argument like that, it's way more fucking interesting than people realise. Like, he wasn't even in that race for most people. But the joke is, if now that you know how hard it is for Zonic, suddenly Zeus is fucking, his stock's just automatically risen without doing anything.
Yeah.
And spoiler, are you ready for the real one? Here's the fucking juice that's going to make you very sad. I literally got confirmation from Zeus, and I told this information directly to Carlos's face after he lost PGL Stockholm. Zeus will coach or GM your G2 team. I would recommend you sign him. Instead, he went and signed the bloody rival guy from the other French team because, as always, people have to be like, can I fuck my rival at the same time? That's like the biggest turn on for all these fucking owners because if you don't know, they're all just like mates and bantering behind the fucking scenes. So, like, the joke is, that's like, nobody knows that Zeus is actually like the sleeper GOAT coach. Like, I would have signed him for this G2 team immediately. Spoiler, he would have kicked fucking Nico up his arse. He'd have brought in the right players and he'd have figured out this style already. I don't know if they'd be number 1, but they'd be way better than they are now.
Well, they just look lost right now. I mean, it's one thing to say that they've had all these different roster moves, but Xtaz, like we were talking about earlier, it's a vote of no confidence almost just because of the fact that he hasn't immediately found some way to get players in line and solve these interpersonal conflicts, which we assume are happening, but he himself confirmed that there was a dispute between him and Alexi B in one of those 1PVFR interviews or something, because for whatever reason, I've noticed that the French scene just has like, here's an interview where we talk very candidly. It'll never become translated.
It is good.
It will
it's
never
cool.
be translated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it stays that way, but it's
you're right. By the way, if people have never read, like, because they nearly always do a translation as well. If you've never read them, you won't even believe the details. They just drop. It's like what I just did there. They're just dropping gems. Like, then this guy should have joined. Actually, we were thinking of kicking this guy. And the dude is, they'll be doing it about players still in the team. Like, it's like they'll be sat there like, we were thinking of kicking Masuda. He probably never thought he'd make it, but I'm glad he made it anyway, mate. See you next week. Fuck. It's wild. The informal vibe of it is crazy, isn't it? Those interviews. It's almost like they don't know they're being interviewed. It's like a secret hidden camera or something. It reminds me of those ones where they interview like the Facebook employee, over like. If you don't know, by the way, I'll give you a little pro tip for fans who don't understand how that works. Spoiler, what they really do there is that's like a fucking smoking hot, like 23-year-old like journalist who wants to like, I just want to talk to you about how Netflix works or whatever. Like, and then what happens is they're with some nerd engineer guy who's got no game. And so what they're doing is suddenly it's just working. The woman's responding, but she seems to only respond when I talk about like all the straight fire shit behind the scenes at my job. You know what? Fuck, this is my in. Yeah, anyway, you're not telling anyone. They say, you won't believe this, but we do actually restrict the algorithm. Like, the joke is like, that's like what these fucking interviews feel like. Like, why are you giving all this info? This is crazy. They're actually fire. I don't even like that Nell guy, but those interviews are fire.
Yeah.
No, they work. They give us a valid, very, very useful context for figuring out what's going on. And that's why I've been so confused by the Alexi B stuff too. The fact that they decided to also swap him out for Hooxi. I know you've talked about this before, Thor, but like now that we've seen a few results now, and maybe they haven't looked terrible, but also haven't looked amazing right out the gate. For me, the results doesn't matter. They could have won everything for the first few months, and I still would have been like, no, this can't happen.
Sorry, come on, hit me with it. I've got the answer.
Absolutely no way this could happen. But surely Hooxi is not going to be the solution. Like, it just doesn't even compute for me. Maybe the JKS angle is more debatable, although I still think that he's also a questionable one. But he's okay. If you're going to say that you wanted to replace Jax and you needed a player who was going to be an upgrade, I can see where you would think JKS would be an upgrade, especially if you got Xtaz on board and he's actually doing his job coaching and stuff. But with the Hooxi angle, it's like, where is this guy's pedigree? Why did they think that he was the right one? They memed on it with their announcement video where they were like, yeah, Hooxi, what do you bring to the table? And he's just, Nico, shut up, or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, hopefully that it can be said without you getting kicked. But where's the rest of the confidence? Where's the examples of you leading?
Here's how you find out what an actual twat Nico is. Spoiler, I've met the guy in real life many, many times. Like, all you need to know is this. The first time I ever spoke to him, he just got super mad when I'd said, like, some clip was sketchy. He was like, you think I'd cheat, do you? In, like, a bar, and I just don't give a fuck. So I was like, yeah, what about it? What are you going to do? And he was like, yeah, exactly. Shut the fuck up and get that drink down, you little twat. Get that fucking bread head off, or I'll come get that bread. I'll be an influencer all over your shit, mate. So anyway, right, for real. Right, basically, there's what's hilarious. They've already set up the fail, haven't they? Because since they've all told you it wasn't Alexi B's problems with Nico that got him kicked, that means they can now go, Nico didn't ask for Hooxi. So as usual, the greatest player in their team, who should be catered to some degree, never gets the players he wants. Just magically, the players he wants seem to join the team, except the one time I told Carlos, sign Alexi B, you must go for this. He's actually pretty good. And the joke is, he could be like a mini Carrigan, and if you don't tell Nico that, maybe he'll actually respond to it like he used to. So except for that one time that, as I pointed out, I almost fucked up Nico's team for him by trying to make it better. You're welcome, dickhead. He then, like, oh, he didn't do it. Sorry. Everyone else in G2 just decided, apropos of nothing, to sign motherfucking Hooxi from Copenhagen Flames.
Yeah.
By the way, have you ever even heard anyone raving like, oh, the tactics of Copenhagen Flames and how was he doing? Nobody ever. He's even Danish. Have you ever heard anyone like, why isn't Astralis getting Hooxi? Have you ever heard anyone, MSL, why would I sign him when Hooxi's available? Nobody ever has even given this guy any rep. The joke was, in Copenhagen Flames, he was the last player you'd sign. You would sign like Roy, then maybe Nikadors. They're like mate, the last one is Hooxi, because the joke is, we all think when the other players go, he's going to go back down with the Asilians of the world to tier 4, get a couple of good players, rise up again. Oh, I see those 2 gears are good. Here we go. Back down you go. That should be his career. Instead, somehow, he parlayed 2 bullshit major runs into playing with Nico in G2. Like, in that scenario, either Nico didn't ask that, in which case, reach around here. Is there any balls down there? Any nuts? Any things that produce shit that make a human, mate? Because at this point, I don't know if you want to win. If you want to win, don't just sit around letting other people bring dickheads in your team who have no chance of winning. And if you were involved with it, I said this in the past, and it rings so true. It's aged so well. Nico has the most ass-tasting teammates of all time. All you need to know is Nico really goes off shit like, how good were you when I got good first? That was 6 years ago. Hence, the joke is he would have recruited Shox as his IGL and Exist and Pronax and Fallen as his AWPer. And he did get Cold Zero. He broke the fucking bank. My mate Lurpis had those motherfuckers over a barrel, fucking them up the arse until he gave them $1 million. Like Mario jumping on a fucking block, making the coins come out. It was unreal. They paid $1 million fucking dollars or something for this twat. And he just came over and they were like, we're best friends. We always wanted to play together. After like a year and a half, like, yeah, it's been real. I'm going to go from my own org, FaZe Clan, that apparently I control. I'm just going to go to G2 as well. In fact, I'm only going basically to get the fuck away from you. Which, by the way, did spawn the greatest revenge move of all time. Massive props to Cold Zero. He didn't stay around to benefit from it, but then his revenge move was to bring Carrigan into FaZe Clan. I fucking love that. Cold Zero, you are the most petty twat of all time, but that is fucking A-class banter. That is like, you know what? If you don't want it, then fuck it, I'll bring your ex in. I love that shit. That's fucking amazing. So yeah, basically the point is, like, I get the vibe, like, this guy has such a weird taste in what he wants from teammates. So what I hate about this is, even though they've all done their good job and said that the day leader didn't demand this move be done, the vibe was, Alexi B micromanages too much. By the way, the implication you do understand there is, nobody can ever tell Nico what to do. That is basically what we're inferring, because why would Jax have a problem with it? Why would Hunter have a problem with it? Greatest guy ever. Why would any of them have a problem with it? Oh, so just one guy with a breadhead who seems to have big problems with people who ride IGLs. So then you think about this, right? In comes Hooxi. The only reason we all said, fuck it, I mean, at this point, roll the dice, I guess, is because we were promised. Like I said, despite this, the only reason you would sign an up-and-coming IGL like that is he has the best tactics ever. No, it's the opposite. It's he's going to let Nico do what he wants. In fact, that's why it's going to work. Because now he's going to get out of the way, just manage the team, sort of, let their boys run loose, and they've got all these skills. They've got Monacy, Hunter. I think they've even got fucking JKS coming up the back. Like, the joke is they're just going to roll over the team. He is going to go, Nico, go kill. And then he's going to go, thank you for the medals. The point is, that hasn't worked. So my problem is this, like, at what point in time does Nico ever enter this equation? Like, at some point in time, we have to acknowledge he likes to kick out players who go and do really good shit elsewhere, did good shit before. And he loves to bring in players who will never do anything again in Counter-Strike. Like, I just find it crazy because, like, mate, this isn't one org even. The old excuse was it was FaZe Clan. He's now done it in G2. And I can tell you from behind the scenes, I know the G2 owner very well. He has a very different mindset to this. He wouldn't sign players like this. He wants the best players. He wants a super team. He wants to win everything. So the other thing I would say is this. Even though everyone thinks right now, well, it's Nico, you can never kick Nico. Motherfucker, Carlos kicked out Reckless. You are aware Reckless is like I wouldn't say it, but some people would say like the GOAT European League of Legends player. Still in theory in his prime. He won the MVP the year he got kicked out afterwards, by the way. And most people would say like he's still like the best player to play that spot. But Carlos's shit was, if I don't vibe with your attitude, and worse, your attitude's holding me back from winning, you can go as well. And everyone has to know that. I can cop perks, I can cop fucking everyone. So here's all I'll say. Nico probably hasn't even thought of this, but you can get cut too, homie. And I'm not just talking about, the old thing when the mum used to put the bread. Yeah, whatever. I'll always go back to that because that is one of my all-time great ones I made up. I just made it up in a show match, but it just stuck. It was just fire, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I didn't know the origins, but everybody's been saying it. Similar, your legacy, Thorin, is like, you talk about eras and you talk about like the different kinds of play and breadhead. So. Oh,
and then also when everyone just takes all the terminology I made up, they're like, thing about you, Thorin, is you don't really understand the game on a deep level. Now, what I think G2 needs is their third star needs a bit more flagging. Fuck you. It's like, I invented what you're talking about, motherfucker. What is this? It's wild, isn't it?
It's the perfect way to out the person. Like you said, it would be really useful if people did have on their profile, like, started watching.
Yeah. You could even forgive them. Like, I'll give you an example. Everyone thinks Thorin just blocks everyone. He can't handle anything. No, I'll tell you what's mad. There's a real trend, and I actually honour this. If someone writes just a totally stupid-ass comment, but I click their profile. This has happened before. Sometimes in their profile, they're actually self-aware. They're like, I'm just a mentally ill guy just spewing opinions about esports. I always just go, you know what? Let this guy live. At least he gets it. That's actually fine. If you sort of know you're an arsehole, it's fine. It's the ones that actually think they're being cool when they're just flaming the shit out of you. There's the ones I can't handle.
You were talking earlier about how obviously Xtaz is like, what's going on with him? What's the significance? And you also alluded to this before. There was an interview quote where he said, Nico has never disrespected his IGL or said anything. If it's happened, I haven't seen it. The obvious joke being, where the fuck were you? You haven't even been coaching this team.
That was my joke. My joke was like, well, we admitted he was never in any of the scrims. And I'm just, you have to understand, I am a dickhead, but I'm just really quick on my feet. That's the problem.
Yeah. There you go.
That's bob and weave. I know how to do it, mate.
Yeah. So that's my take. I don't know what's going to happen. I have less confidence in Xtaz than I used to, and I obviously don't think the Hooxi role is going to go out very well. So I mean, I don't even. Who do you even get by the time they're ready to chop and change again? Is Alex still going to be around? Are you going to try Alexi B again? Like, who's even going to be available for you? You had the opportunity to hire obviously Zeus. You mentioned.
I actually think there's no one. I don't think anyone exists. Listen, as a coach, I think you can sign someone, but as you've seen by what I've set up. If you have to be either really good in the past, well, those guys just aren't good years later, are they? It's not that they... By the way, Fallen isn't like some trash player. He just became one because he played like a billion years. You know he played at 1.6 as well, guys.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't play for 3. He should be bad now. He's like 30 years old. He's been in the game a billion years, and the game moved on beyond him. So my problem is, if you sign those guys, you're destined for a bad time. Maybe that's even what Vitality's about to find out with Zonic and Dupree and Magus. Maybe you signed them at the end of their careers, like when they're not actually good anymore, like when fucking George Weah played in the Premier League. Spoiler, he wasn't like the Ballon d'Or player at that time. He was playing for like I think he played for like Blackburn or something, or some shit team like that. It's like, it was actually disgrace. Like, why is he in the Premier League playing for this team? So the problem I have is that it's either that, or you notice the only other type of IGL we're allowed is the bitch. The guy who just does everything. He has no ego. Well, spoiler, those guys aren't ever going to win majors. Look at the people who win majors. That IGL has his imprint all over the team. Go look at that series me and Richard are doing, that time travel lad. Dude, the IGLs are mega influential in these teams. It's probably the most underrated role in the history of the game. So, like, when you look at that scenario, like, I think that's the problem. I don't know who... That's why, for me, I always go back to the Carrigan angle. It's like, homie, if Carrigan ain't good enough for you, who the fuck is? And what's good is back then they'd go, what about Glaive? A, he wasn't going to leave Astralis. And B, is that even true? Does that even hold up anymore? That angle was not as simple. So my real issue is this. It's not that I really think Nico has to play with Carrigan, but whatever it is he couldn't handle about Carrigan, I think he has to get past that, because that's what's stopping him getting anyone else. Like, there's clearly some sort of a relationship issue there where, look, he manages to frag out himself. Props for that. In some level, that is what you're supposed to do, but there's always dysfunction in Nico's teams, and I'm sorry, Nico was the only connecting factor in every one of those teams. And by the way, on teammates, it's the same thing. Nico will kick out a Carrigan or a Guardian, but if you're Olaf, Meister and Rain, you can stay forever, mate. No, how bad you are, because you're a cool guy, you cover my back, you're nice to have a beer with. Like, these aren't the reasons to have someone in a team, guys. I've always said that about the Shocks and Smiths. Motherfucker, I'm so legit. I know everyone goes, oh, you never say to a player. It's the other way around, you idiot. I put it this way, I say certain words I never say online to players. I've told Shocks to his face, mate, I don't care that this guy's your mate. Fucking win the tournament and then go and take him out for beers at the after party, dickhead. Don't have him in your team so you can't win the tournament. That makes no sense. You can be friends outside of it. He can play in the second best French team. So same thing, like, I've never understood the idea, like, we're mates first and then we're going to try and win. Like, well, good luck with that. That's never worked ever, by the way. In fact, you know that's the thing about the Astralis players that shocked everyone. Everyone stupidly thinks, well, if you win, you must all be best friends. Spoiler, in Fnatic, they weren't all best friends. I won't say who, but there was at least one member I used to always see just get left behind by the others, like an after party on his own, and then they'd all just fuck off and do, I don't know, go and do whatever they do, or go to another party, or not even go to the after party. In Astralis, you're all going to be like, they're all best. No, what happens is when you win everything in the worst tournament ever, semi-finals, you tend to be pretty happy with everyone, and everyone seems like, you're doing your job, I'm doing your job, let's keep stacking them chips, shall we? There's no reason to have an argument, but as you saw towards the end, it got fractious. All of a sudden, people were taking breaks. Like, wait, imagine, by the way, being Device, you actually have like some fucked up, like, irritable bowel system or whatever that's fucking you. Anytime you're under stress, you played all those tournaments, you're even claiming you can only travel so far because of these problems. And then suddenly, two other teammates are like, yeah, we're taking breaks, we're not going to be playing, so you have to play because, you know, we need 5 men in the server, and you don't even get a break. Like, these teams, winning is what solves all. Winning is the fucking panacea, boys. It is the balm that soothes any wounds and makes it all fine because you can go, whatever, let's see if we win the next one. That's why, by the way, the joke is like the simple topic before. That's what keeps drawing him back in. It's like every time he thinks, like, no, I don't want to fuck around with some guy young. He wasn't even the best player on bloody Team Spirit. Also, get rid of that tattoo, you shit cunt. Yeah, I'm talking with my haircut. So anyway, right, obviously giving aesthetic advice. There's another thing, by the way. Don't ever try that if you're up and coming player. If you're up and coming caster, don't make fun of people's looks, things about their country. Only I could do that because I'm a fucking professional. I'm a trained professional. Do not attempt this at home. You will fail. Spoiler, I'll probably fail a few times, get in trouble. Probably have to block an Ecodex or something. But anyway, so yeah, basically in that scenario, like, I think it's obvious what you have to change, mate. It's just obvious.
Yeah, I think VP as well is one that kind of springs to mind. You know what I mean? With the ground just sort of falling out from under them and not being friends and all that.
Oh, of course,
stuff, you know?
yeah.
Some of the greatest players to touch the franchise, let alone the game. You know,
that was real, by the way. Yeah, they were really like, because you can imagine that as well, mate. Once like someone has to be cut and that game of musical chairs keeps going round and round, it gets really vicious. Yeah. Like it gets so that eventually it's even like the joke is like Neo and Taz were looking at each other like, you know, listen, homie, it's being real and that, but I'm going to get that 20k for next month. Because I always said that, by the way, and I was so right on that. You know, when we first found out at like the beginning of 2016, they get 5k a month or whatever, right? I said this because fans would always do that thing like Football Manager, like, why don't they just change players? Like, why doesn't that guy retire and go to like a tier 2 team and bring up like, you know, Snatchy and them? It's like, they make $25,000 a month if they win or lose in Poland. I think if I was them, I would be on like some fucking Republican level shit, like, you can get this salary out of my cold dead hands. 25k, mate, that's like you're living like a king there. In that scenario, the joke is, I always used to say this, because you know they would always do those tweets like, we apologise for the results of, oh, sorry guys. It's like, that's just like, buy me another month, that's another 25k, that translates in, yeah, of course. It becomes a different game for you then, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, it's
but definitely got nasty in all these teams, mate, all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the money angle's always an interesting one, right? I think
that'll
probably never go away, but yeah, absolutely, you know.
Well, don't we think it's going to go hit a downturn? Obviously, there's talk in League of Legends all over the place.
People claim there's going to be like the market correction, yeah. Basically, what people, I don't know how much true this is, people claim that because all these big super teams are failing in League, that everyone's going to make like the average money you pay way lower. The only problem I have with that is it implies a change to a mechanism in esports, which doesn't seem like it's changed, which is stupid money comes in, they don't have any actual status to get players, so you get them by paying 2 times more. You pay 3 times more if you're really bad. That'll always be, unfortunately, a stupid man's hack to having a half-decent team. So I don't know if I totally believe it. I think there'll always be some teams will be outrageous. But I do think, like, if you're on the outskirts, you might get fucked, though. If you're like those teams that used to make, like, 15k, but you're actually, like, you know, the 13th, you're probably not going to make that anymore. Maybe you go down, like, to 7k or something, you know. So in that case, we could go back a few years.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting. I mean, at the minute, apparently, you know, EG are on whatever they're on.
With the Zywoo league,
you know,
sure.
Yeah.
That is absurd, considering the fact that they have, for one, they have barely played any tournaments, and for another, it's like,
you know what I find weird? Everyone flames the players, But the players didn't sign those contracts.
Of course
They didn't
not.
agree to that amount of money. And also, by the way, what utter clowns Evil Genius's management are. When you're paying someone like Cirque 30k a month, like homie,
absolutely absurd. Yeah,
homie, he wouldn't get that from any other team. Who are you bidding against? That's my problem. Remember, this is the most basic concept of a negotiation. If you have no leverage, you have to take whatever I offer you. So in that scenario, it's if I say to you like 10k and you're like 30k, and I'm like, do you have any other offers? You're like, I have one for 7k. It's like, I'm going to go to 8k now. That's how a negotiation works. The joke was, they had to sign Stewie 2K and bring him to their org. They had to bring Automatic back from Valorant. These signings make sense why they have to pay over the odds. Why did you pay 2 players who were already in your org that much money? Why does Cirque and Breeze get that much money? They just pissed away the last year and a half. That's the part I don't get. That's like you went back to players who were failing and had no prospects, by the way. If they went to other teams, it was for way less money, or it was to be the shittest player on Team Liquid or something. Why are those players able to get a re-up of an insane contract, of a Nico-like contract? That's the part I think is so egregious. It's actually that they themselves got tricked by the circumstance. They'd already had those players. Here's the thing, everyone will say it now, no one knew Stewie would be this bad. No one knew like that the team would fail like this. I actually thought those elements might even be good and it would just be Cirque and Breeze shit. So I can't get how they gave Cirque and Breeze that money. I think they just played themselves. That's like a fucking congratulations, you played yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know where the angle is as well. I'm not sure because we just don't know. Maybe you have a bit more of an insight or whatever, but like the contracts and all that are not really public. But it still seems like it is a massive trend to have players on kind of the same, similar money, you know, not really all that different, where it's like a Nico or a Simple are going to get way more because they can deliver way more, but you know, your some Young's maybe a bad example because he's not necessarily, you know, we don't rightly know what his future is.
He could be on like a little boy contract or something. Sure,
but let's say he gets signed, you know, and they bring him in, and I would imagine that they're going to give him very similar. Maybe the bonuses work different. I don't fucking know because they're not public. But
when Snappy was on here earlier, we had a little bit of talk about all the HLTV placements as bonus activations and stuff. And
yes, it does.
You know,
yes.
Yeah.
But no,
it's crazy to think about that. But.
I just mean in the sense of like if it gets activated for Simple, does he get more of a bonus? Because he's probably been a bigger part of them getting and activating that bonus.
Oh, by the way, that's another thing that's outrageous about the Breeze and Cirque contracts. Sometimes, I'll give you a quick example, because people will remember this when I say it. You remember how the most annoying thing about the announcements from Cloud9 wasn't Henry G's attitude. It's that the term was always value of the deal. Fans would take that as that's his salary, and they'll break it down by how many months, and they go, what? Holy shit, Ashertag gets paid $54,000 a month! And they didn't consider other factors like everything else that's involved with that, right? Here's what they don't understand. Because that's total value of the deal, that's with every activation and bonus. So what people don't know, and this is why the Cirque and Breeze one is even more egregious, what you actually do if you have Cirque and Breeze is this. Because they've got fuck all leverage, you tell them, look, I'll give you 15k a month, but if you win the major, if you win a tournament, if you get top 8, that activates 5, 10, 15k a month more. So you can get to the 30 that you want if you succeed. And by the way, in that scenario, unless you have an offer elsewhere, how can you say no to me? Because if you say no, you're admitting you weren't going to do it, and that's why you're saying no. So if people don't know, I can't say for all the stars, but there actually are a lot of contracts that are now structured the way you're talking about, Scriv, where even top players, the point is, it's like you get this base, which is pretty good if you're top, but it's like you get this much more if like we make the major and then we make top 8. You get this. I'll tell you what, if you win the major, you get a huge bonus. If you get like top 5 in the HLTV ranking, you get this, because obviously we can parlay that with our org and sell stuff. That is a way it's done. And by the way, that's way smarter. I'm glad we've come to that, because actually, to bring it back to before, I do think that's part of what ruined Virtus Pro. I'm only half joking when I say that. I think eventually it became a game of how long can we keep getting these salaries, not why aren't we winning the tournament? Like, eventually that reality overtook the other one. So I would love to have, like, same thing with the Nico thing earlier. If I knew, I'm not certain, but I would imagine there's a bit of this. If I knew Nico actually made way less base salary if the team doesn't do well, and therefore there's actually like a consequence to if he is either not asking for people or ask, then I'd be sort of cool with it. It's like, hey, it's on his head. Because I've always thought the other part that I've found is gross is this. You might notice from Flashpoint on, I always seem like I support the team org over the players in the team. And people are like, what the hell? You support like the boss over the employees. Like, they might be exploiting them. It's like, no, because the joke is in Counter-Strike, the current model before the one we're talking about with the incentives built in, actually allowed the player to exploit the owner. Basically, if I had a good year for someone else, I can come to your team, get an insane base salary, be a dickhead for a year. At the end, I've got all the money. You wasted millions. You're an idiot. You built a super team around me. And then you know what? If I'm Stewie 2K, if I'm Nico, if I'm Fallen, it's worse than that. I'm not sticking around to rebuild. Your team's shit now, mate. Thanks for the millions. I'm going to go fuck someone else's money up. I hate that. I hate that. By the way, that's why, even though I don't like the way people went at him, it was sort of righteous to take down this Stewie 2K, because this guy had been playing God with other people's money for a few years at this point. And as I said, every time it went south, he would be the one that bailed. He would go, well, it's been real, but this is all fucked up. It's like, who do you think fucked it up? Who do you think did that? And you got paid a king's ransom for doing it. So I'm glad that's sort of being phased out of esports, maybe by the market corrections and by people having to figure out, like, look, I can pay you the 40k, but I have to get something for it. I can't just on a hope and a prayer that you're going to do something with it.
Just adds a little bit more gravitas to the idea that, oh, this top player really is motivated to play. I mean, theoretically, it would be great in an ideal world if the, zeros that in their bank account weren't really the main motivating factor, but it's got to be something in their process. And ideally, Nico and co would realize, oh, hey, we've got a legacy that we're leaving behind. At some point, the money's spent. At some point, I hang up the mouse. How good was I throughout that? How many times did I win? What were all the ones that got away? Like, you had the Forest Reflections recently, and it's just like one of the things he said was like there was this tournament that I didn't win, and it still is something that bothers me. Years and years have passed, it's like really great professional
joke
players,
is Nico will be watching that game, like the Boston Major final with his grandson. He'll be like, you know what, son, none of that was my fault. I can tell. Listen, we can call up your uncle, all of them, Rain, they'll all tell you it was not my fault. So in the end, didn't I sort of win the major? And then basically his grandson will look up and just go, Nico, still, whatever. With his little bread head.
Oh, God. Yeah. But I don't know. Again, we're in this weird sort of like middle limbo where it's like esports kind of 10 to 15 years ago there's sort of no money in it. So, what are you really doing it for? You gotta be winning everything to make it sort of legitimate. If you come in last all the time, it's like either you have something else or, you get money from somewhere, blah, blah, blah. But life does kind of get in the way. And then I think we're not quite, maybe some, but we're not quite at where full generations and full lineups and full teams have been doing it, their parents put them in it or whatever, you know what I mean? And the path to pro, as, ESL would like to sell it maybe at the surface level, but that kind of, we've got something here. This kid was, global by 8 years old or whatever kind of angle they want to take. So we're in the weird sort of middle ground where it's like you have some really, really solid players and indeed like talent and indeed, have sweat and all that kind of stuff, but maybe not the blood and tears, let's say. So I think that, they can get to a point where it's like, I am kind of one of the best. I'll be remembered for a bit. I've won a big tournament maybe, right? Or had a good run or done something that was a bit above and beyond. We were a North American team that no one really expected much out of, or we were a random CIS team at the major, and a couple of those players go remembered, not quite all of them. So it is kind of, if you manage to scoop up and do a bit of swindling or whatever, and indeed get yourself a good contract out of that, what in a year's time after a good contract or whatever would be considered a fleeting success. And then I think we're also maybe coming out the other end of it, but a lot of teams in the sort of like 2017 to 2020, you could maybe say, where it's like actually networking with other players is an incredibly valuable thing to do, right? Because, again, it's like some teams are going to pull you in because their star player says, and I'm talking, again, conventional sports, love drawing the bridge, I guess, but, some teams are going to say our star player wants to play with this guy or whatever, and they will indeed pull someone in from, across the world. But most of the time, that's not really going to happen. It's going to be management that say, no, this is the vision, this is what we want to build, this is what we want to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But at the minute, I think we are, like I say, coming out the other end of it. But there were, for a good few years there, where, they like, for me, it's, Fallen to Liquid, right? It's like, probably not a move that should have been made off of merit, off of current performance, off of what could he bring. It is just sort of a, I'm a player, I respect him. As Thorin sort of, you've been over where it's like they maybe view how he was a few years ago. They maybe think that he used to shit on me. So surely shocks to Liquid as well. Sorry to keep ragging on Liquid, but these are the types of moves where it's like players have clearly made these moves and a bit of backing from the, because as well, it's like management maybe don't know what they're talking about. They maybe know how to run a business. They maybe know how to try and make this thing profitable. But when it comes to building a championship team, the GM, well, a lot of teams don't really have one. So the coach, well, it's like they're maybe in the same sort of position as where the players are at mentality-wise. So, I just feel like there's a really weird kind of period of these contracts and these players getting a bit too much involved. And you can really sell yourself on the short term. And
when you're saying
really
when you retire, obviously it will be whack if you're trying to big up but I was pretty good. I was in a couple of teams that made a run at a major once. I've found out actually the distinction from doing those reflections interviews. Here's the line that actually shows if you're a GOAT legend or you were just a guy who was a good player at Counter-Strike. If you're someone like Forrest, even though I have 3 hours, I actually realised I can't even just talk only about all the majors you had success at, mate. You might have been in the semi-finals, 15 majors in your career. The joke is I'm actually barely going to talk about those. Maybe I'll only talk about the ones you won, and even then not all of them, because I haven't got time. I won't have any other interesting questions. It'll just be about this match and what happened. Whereas meanwhile, if you're a guy who had one great run ever, we're going to pick that fucking bones of that apart as though it was the greatest thing of all time. Even though at the end it's and did you think you could win that semi? I thought we could have, but they were the better team on the day. Shame we never got them next. I don't even have to say anything there. The interview just tells you all you need to know. One is just the Hall of Famer. The other one, you were pretty good at Counter-Strike. Okay, cool.
Not much of a legacy when you compare the two, right? When you weigh it up, it's pretty obvious which one was bigger. And that's why I think that's another reason why, you and I are kind of similar in that way, Thorin, is we just get frustrated when professional players, the obvious ones from the Brazilian scene would be KNG, or even Henny with the constant, here's Lucas, here's, what is going on there?
Or even people like Fur. The saddest one about Fur is I'm pretty sure the last 3 or 4 years, he just takes 6 months, he'll just be on it, and he's I'm just going to phone it in, fuck it, 6 months, whatever. Because he's Fur. He actually seems, by the way, I actually think in terms of raw talent, he is the most talented Brazilian ever. He's fucking unbelievable, mate. Sure. He just has some insane skill. He reminds me of old Shocks. He can just rock up and turn it on and just go, I'm just going to fuck you around this game, torture you completely, tear your whole team up because that style's mental. And then after that, just go, maybe I just chill for the next few tournaments, though. That's the problem. Their scene is so infuriating, mate. It is. It's the nightmare, in it.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of spreads across, there are just some people, it seems like that, where they can pick up multiple sports or multiple games. Or I bet Fur is a class player. They're sure pro players, but I bet he could maybe, whack it as a good DPS player in Overwatch or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or COD or something like that. Similar kind of skill set, and it's just immediately transferred. Whereas there are going to be players maybe like Cold or Device where it's kind of CS and you got to know each and every angle of CS and work really, really hard in that. It's Fur's all right, cool, I got it, bit of practice, and just make it really high up the rankings. If not, you never know. Make it in.
The people who are the mega practices are a really rare breed. I mean, I'll just say it out right now. Everyone on talk shows, we all love to all criticize and critique. All I'll say is this: you are aware in the talk world, I'm fucking get right. I'm fucking simple. I have the unlimited work ethic, constantly goat years. There's plenty of people who love to critique. That's one of the reasons why old fucking Ryan at Push V. I don't know what I'm doing with these names, man. I'm too good. That's why when the guy like that's Cloud9's not good enough for me. Who the fuck are you? One, that's your identity. Hey, I'm from North America. It's about Cloud9. I think you're a bit late to the party on that, homie. Didn't see you in 2014. Secondly, that whole thing of this team's not good enough for my standards. Who the fuck are you? Let's compare you as a journalist to them as players. They're leagues above you, mate. You were just a nobody. The joke is half your shit's just stupid stories that weren't real on your site. I know at least 2 that were complete fabrications, or just saying shit on Twitter. When people go, all you do is tweet. No. What I do is have the most prolific career in about 4 disciplines, and then on the side fuck around and goat it on Twitter too. Exactly. I always think of Twitter as my throwaways. It's the fucking scribbles on a notepad I chuck into a waste bin, but I press send on Twitter because you all love drama. So the joke is my throwaways are fucking going viral and fucking all, but I can't stop being viral. It's insane. Although obviously maybe Ryan knows how he could help me out with that. Maybe whatever, it's fucking fire. So I think a lot of people, by the way, think that's who I'd be as a player. I'd be get right. You wouldn't, mate. You would be the guy, because you know the saddest thing about these guys getting all the 30k. Like, who cares? I get 30k. They're not thinkers. They're not building like, an amazing like a fucking like a bar in their basement with like a mahogany wood thing and like an actual man, like another martini, sir, coming up like serving the best drink. They're just going and buying like the most basic bitch Gucci belt and like a fucking taking some club girl to Dubai who's never going to see them in 2 years and just like partying in the club. This is amazing. Like they're just wasting it all. They're just pissing it all up the wall. So look, I'm sure they're having some like fun times, but it's not even like the money's some like epic thing. As you say, it'll be gone one day, and then everyone will just look at their career and go, oh, so it was just about some money. That was it. Meanwhile, you know, when everyone goes on about mental health, what's great is now we live in a world, it comes from Americans, where you treat humans like they're an alien race who came off a spacecraft, and this is like a brand new environment where, oh, we can just breathe air. It's okay, we can breathe air. Right, what about the food? Oh, some of that's okay, we've got to be careful. It's like we can never ever feel a negative emotion. If we ever feel uncomfortable, or this seems aggressive, or that's problematic, like this is the new world where we have to nerf the world and no one can ever feel bad. Meanwhile, if you know, a mate of mine, Get Right, had the most legendary mentality probably of any Counter-Strike player ever. The joke is, he wouldn't phrase it this way, but I'll like paraphrase what his mentality was. His mentality was, how much do I have to fuck my mental health up to win everything? Everything. As in, he was worse than Forrest, mate. That's not a joke, that story. If Get Right won 4 tournaments and then lost the 5th, I'm a piece of shit because I lost the 5th one. Now, you have to understand, guys, if you don't have that mentality, you'll never even win 2 tournaments in your career. This guy had he was on another level. So it wasn't about skill with people like that. By the way, there's people more skilled than Get Right in history, but you'll never beat that work ethic. He'll be there at the end when you're long gone, when you're phoning years in, when you don't have the right teammates, when you just don't care anymore. You know what? Maybe you even use that money. You got some super hot influencer girlfriend. Now you're off in some other world getting drawn away from things. These guys, that's why it's so cool. Get Right and them did do it before the money came, because they proved all these new people are bitches. All these ones like, oh, I only get 10k a month. Right? Get Right was doing that for 1k a month. And fuck all prize money, and you might not even get paid the prize money, and your salary might be 3 months late. You might not have any rent to pay, and you still grind those hours. You still, by the way, he would go to like a local LAN and play pickups just to keep his game sharp. This guy was unbelievable. And then people want to tell me, oh, like, well, of course you'd try like simple if you got paid that much money. No, the joke is you wouldn't try like that if you got paid that money. You'd go, I'm on this money, lol. How come can I keep this scam going? You have to actually be the guy already who's like the genius, perfect like work ethic. That's how you get to the status they are. It doesn't follow the other way around. And no, it isn't just a job. These are exceptional human beings. Like I said, the joke of what Get Right did, it's like Koreans in esports. Yeah. I'm willing to fucking die to win this tournament. In the West, they're like, I don't feel that comfortable. I couldn't really have won the semis. My head was out of it. It's like, oh, fuck yourself, mate. Come on. Look who you're competing against.
Games, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's ridiculous. Well, that's the thing. So like at the risk of going on a tangent, that's probably more fit for revenge of By the Numbers by comparison. Obviously, I think.
Well, personally, because you'll never be on there. So
yeah, there you go. This is well, it's very much like something that you were bringing up in the last episode. Believe it or not, is that there's been this slow but steady devaluing of just what, like, the appreciation of what the West has built broadly speaking, if I can use that, right? And so again, this is a more political topic.
Scrib's so fucking nervous right now. He's like, where is this going though? Where? We are talking esports, right, Pro? Esports, right, mate? I know.
Wrong co-host, homie. So no, but that's the thing, is that because there's been this like you were talking about how long can I keep this scam going? And like maybe 10 years ago, I would have been like that myself. I would have been like searching for a way out. How can I like get money in my account and pay rent and stuff, but not work? You know what I mean?
You're like leaning into the cultural angle, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's exactly that. It's the culture is fuck the system. It's like oppressed you, or it's made you worse or poorer. Ignore everything, literally everything we're using to have this conversation, to watch this conversation, to enjoy, comment on it, send shit through the air. Fuck all that. Like, it's all terrible. And what you can do for yourself is like the most important thing. Look out for number one. And it's like a perversion of, I would say, the Enlightenment ideals, individualism and all that stuff. And so just looking at it like that, it's almost no wonder that if you're not a critical thinker, if you're not a deep thinker like you were describing some of these pros, Yeah, they're really good at shooting people in the head. Not so good at maybe figuring out what is a mind virus and what isn't. What is going to make them poorer from an intellectual or moral or ethical standpoint, and what isn't. And there are lines to draw. Like, that's another thing is people like to say, well, it's all like you were talking about with the blood money at the beginning. Isn't it all blood money?
Yeah,
well,
of course.
There's lines to draw though, isn't there? And so what's yours? Figure it out. And a lot of people don't, right? And so of course they're just gonna be like, yeah, spend the money. Let's go. Let's live this lifestyle.
I know what you're leaning into here. Basically, I always make this point that when people ask me like mad questions that like no human could answer, like what does NA have to do to dominate Counter-Strike? Like, what? Like, what powers do I have in this scenario? Like, how am I supposed to know all the answers? What I often say when it's topics about NA or the West versus like Korea, etc. in esports, I always say the joke is I'd have to like fundamentally, like, I'd have to be like a social engineer for 20 years just to set the ground for them to be able to compete on an even ground. Because I always say this, Koreans aren't like some superhuman genetic material that just plays video games. They just have this they have two things combined. One, they have an insane culture of work ethic where the idea is it's your duty to try your absolute hardest because you represent Korea. You represent the Korean people. And by the way, your family name. Like your public face is a massive thing in Confucian societies. So as a result, you already, by default, should be trying your hardest. I always say, you'll even see people who work shit jobs who are just trying their hardest. Like that joke where Muhammad Ali said, like, if I'd have been a street sweeper, I'd have been the greatest street sweeper ever. He just means that in a witty way, though. These motherfuckers are doing that. There's guys who are like working on a train who are the best ever at doing that, but they're getting minimum wage and you don't know it, but they think that's their duty to make Korea great so that people come there and the trains run on time and everything looks awesome and people think, well, we're such a diligent people. That's a real thing. And then the other thing they have, this is why in games they're super sick, is they have a super strong consensus mindset where we all have to agree what the good things are and we all follow them. So basically we all follow the same soap opera. We all follow the same pop singers. We all follow the same players, Faker, T1, Flash, whatever. We're like the ultimate glory supporters, basically. We all just follow the best because that's the best of Korea. Now, when you combine those, you just get a generation, thousands and thousands of players who have all got the get right mindset. Not all of them have the skills, so only some of them are going to make it through. But what you say is this. That's why I don't care about mental health. Because the ones who can't hack it, get the fuck out and let the other guy come in. He's the next in line. He comes forwards. This guy can handle it. Keep him playing. 2 years later, burned out. Bring me another one. You put him in. Whereas what happens in the West, I agree. Basically, you nailed it right there because you're from an older generation, Prologo. What happened was if you were like a Gen X / slacker, like 90s, 2000s kid, the whole vibe was, this is how psyops work. Like, you were too late to the party. The whole world's fucked anyway. The environment's fucked. Food's fucked. Government's fucked. Wars are fucked. Your culture's fucked. You're never going to have a job. You're never going to own a house. You're never going to do anything. You're going to be working in a 7-Eleven saying, do you want tacos with the fucking Coke or do you want Coke Zero? You're going to be doing that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go home, you're going to watch MTV and play video games and call people slurs on the internet. And after that, that's going to be like, you're going to go smoke a joint, go to bed because who gives a shit? It's just about pleasure and life's just basically worthless, isn't it? So as a result, if you become a pro player, by the way, one of the all-time great ways to procrastinate, play games instead of doing your homework, get really good at them. Now I'm so good at my pro, mum. You have to let me do it now. Oh no, I won the LAN. Oh, it's almost like I was right. By the way, you were never right. You were literally the outlier by definition. You didn't know you were right, nor could they have ever known you were wrong or whatever. But in that scenario, when you go through, that's when you get to the top. I always say in the West, we play games. In the East, they work at being really good at them. When you play, it's fun. You want to have fun when you play. It's why Lurpus nailed the CSGO economy point years ago before they switched it. He said, and he was so right, 2016 Envious proves this. He said, oh, these OP pistols being broken now means, yeah, you should force buy all the time. But he said, just wait when they're actually not very well priced and they're not as powerful. And I guarantee all the pros still buy Deagle, still buy Tech9, still buy CZ all the time, because here's what they'll never do. It's boring and not have a gun in around. You don't feel like you have a chance. If you have a CZ and no head armor, fuck, I might fuck around and get a 3K. That's some like thrill seeker behavior in a professional team. You know, think about how like Liverpool plays in the Premier League, mate. They play like strict defense where we all step forwards and do the press and do it. Like, they're not fucking around. So I do whatever I want, feel like, maybe I'll just run forwards. Like, that would never work. So what's wild is in the West, people have, by default, the coolest guy is Shocks, not Get Right. Get Right's the nerd. He's the guy where we're all at the party. Where's Get Right? He's still off playing scrims. Well, fuck him. Didn't he lose the last tournament? Idiot. Meanwhile, if you're Shox, that's why people love those stories me and Richard told, where Shox sounds like some George Best character who's just coming in with like 2 women in the morning, fucking pissed drunk, and then he's like, right, give me a Powerade. Give me le Powerade. I am revived now and energized. I fuck them up. Except Smith, he has -12. I am plus 30 this time. They like win 16-14. That sounds cool because you think, wow, he had so much fun. By the way, it's not even fun, it's just degeneracy, you find out later. It's more to life. But he had so much fun and he got the bag and he sort of was really good anyway. That essentially, to min-max, is people's ethos in life. That is the goal. I used to think this myself. People don't know this. The reason I brag about how much I work and how much I've done is I was one of the laziest motherfuckers you would ever meet, but it's before esports. And I used to be the guy who I only did esports as a procrastination from doing real fucking degrees and stuff, mate. I was like trying to program in C language. And I was like, wait, this is garbage. I already know what the English language. I can get some money doing esports. Lol, this Quake player should win. This is fucking easy. I was boring as shit with that C language book. And so anyway, basically, in that scenario, I think actually what's happened is you have to learn as a Westerner, you have to yourself go on a quest to learn to love hard work, to want to be good at something, to actually improve when you shit at something, when something's not fun, to keep doing it, to get better. Because what I'd say we've lost in the West, some of it's intentional, but that's definitely for another podcast script, would be stuff like, first of all, we don't have like a martial spirit. That doesn't exist. That's obviously a heavy part of the Asian cultures. By the way, in Korea, they still have mandatory military service. That's still even a thing. You literally have to serve your country to be a citizen. Then in the West, not only is that gone completely, like there's no punishment. Punishment doesn't exist in North. Even, by the way, in League of Legends, Europe and North America are drastic. Because in Europe, people will flame each other in like a scrim session and improve. And in NA, if you do that, they just all go to their rooms, get butt hurt and talk privately, and people get kicked out of teams because you hurt their feelings. Like, even that, there's no martial spirit. Gaming is not about being a man and being like a warrior and being the best. It's actually just about people not hurting your feelings, and that means being an artist and doing something. And did it work? Then I have the money. So I'd also say the real problem is this. What you want and what these guys have nailed, what Simple's got, what Get Right's got, because you notice it wasn't actually just about winning the trophies. That was just a metric as to whether they were doing it right. They were going to practice this way no matter what. Is they had a fucking mission in life. They had a purpose in life. Their purpose was be the greatest Counter-Strike player they can ever be. Well, I'll tell you what, as much as that might sound really boring and so much hard work and strain and heartache and what if you don't win, mate, that is the most satisfying thing I think a man, I can only speak from a male perspective, I think a man can ever do in life. When you actually have something and you know you tested yourself to the absolute limits, you even pushed yourself beyond your limits, you improved in ways you didn't think, you learned skills you didn't think you could, you overcame people who were better than you kept battling through challenges. I tell you what, if everyone thinks it sucks in life when you have like a down moment and a challenge, there's nothing more insane than when you overcome the challenge. Overcoming the challenge is better than if you got given that same stuff without the downside. It's so, I'll guarantee you the moment Simple actually won that PGL Stockholm major, it was like the greatest fucking like ecstasy hit to his brain of all time. It was like, holy shit, it was all worth it. It was all those years I wondered, it was all worth it. I don't know, might not have been, that might even itself just be a little pleasure signal going off, but that's the point. These guys had, I always say it this way, right? People think, oh, it's about drive. There's something driving you forwards. No, you're fucked. You're in the old mindset where you think the sergeant has to tell you to do it and then you're a good guy. The most powerful force in the world is attraction. When you are compelled, you are pulled towards being the greatest, to winning everything. That will make it easy to work. You want to work because you want to reach out and grasp that thing. You want to get to that. And we have just lost that in the West completely, mate. It's why in Korea, they come off so fucking weird in interviews in esports because they'll do shit scriv. Like they'll come second in the World Championship and apologize to everyone and say they promised to never play that badly again. And everyone else in the West is like, what? Dude, we'd be over the moon if we made the semis. And it's like, that's a mission to be great. Like you can see how that would be a fire in your belly if you had that.
Yeah, no, I think
I've
like
seen the heroic celebrations. Remember those? Yeah, it's the same vibe.
That's one of the reasons one of the reasons I make fun of them, because the joke is by the way, I know on some level Canadian does that to hype his team. Yeah, there's some of that, right? But the other factor is he really is like robbing you of the real celebration when you win the tournament. He does that when he wins a round in a fucking group stage game, right? What's going to happen when you actually win the major? Is your dick just like Inspector Gadget is going to go 10 feet off? What the fuck are you going to possibly do? You're just going to still slap the table and go, yeah! And they're going to be like, oh, we won another... Oh, shit, we won the tournament, yeah! By the way, they even did sort of do that, because everyone forgets this, but they did win that tiny little land, didn't they? And they were like, feels good to finally win a trophy. Like, look at the field and go fuck yourself, mate. Like, did you see the field for that tournament?
Of course, yeah.
I know, go fuck yourself. Just go fuck yourself, mate.
Oh, man. I don't know. But no, I was just going to say, I remember you talking, I think, in the past about sort of Korean players and stuff, and it's sort of being the best of the field is not enough, right? It's just solidified being the best that you can be.
I've always found it insane. I've always thought the coolest angle, I know people don't like to do this because you're not supposed to compare, the coolest athletes of all time is the ones that know they're so good, they're not even playing their peers, they're playing all the other great players in history. Right, so if you are Kobe, by the way, this is real. That, you know, I don't know if you know this story, so I'll relay it for fans who don't know this. Right? There's two angles in the NBA that are the sickest narrative ever, and stupid fans don't know about it because the media didn't do a good job. One is this detail. It was only when LeBron won with that Cavaliers team in that miracle fashion over the Warriors that Michael Jordan said, because he'd had that footage the whole time, he was like, activate the documentary project, because he knew in that moment people were going to start saying LeBron was the GOAT. So he was like, let me just remind people who the fuck I am. Well, the joke is he can't play him, but he can do that. Kobe Bryant did the same thing, because Kobe knew, well, I was being compared to Jordan, but now this LeBron guy's coming. Right, this is real. If you ever go and look at the stories, in isolation, you won't see the pattern. Kobe went and mentored a generation of players. You should see how he mentored them. He went to Russell Westbrook and he told him, like, you have to be with the Harden and fucking and Durant guy. You're better than him. You're like me. You got the killer attitude. You should shoot more. Don't be like me. Take as many shots as you want. That literally made Kevin Durant left and it ruined their whole team. Then with Kyrie Irving was going to be the Kobe to the LeBron of Shaq, right? It was going to be like the Kobe-Shaq relationship. So they got a ring, right? Right when they got a ring, the year later they lost, right? This is what people don't know. Because Kobe was the mentor of Kyrie and he'd helped him win, and he even said after the first championship, oh, thanks to you, man, like you taught me. He also got in his ear and he was sort of like, because you know what happens when you're the Kobe to a Shaq, though? They'll just say it's because you were with Shaq, you won all your career. And so then Kyrie was like, yes, they never will say I'm the best. And so he just left Scriv and went to a totally different team and tried to be his own superstar. It wasn't as good, and it made LeBron's team slightly worse at the time. So the genius is these guys can't even play anymore, but they're like, there's still pieces on the chessboard, though. They're trying to battle other motherfuckers for their legacy. That's why if you're simple, the joke is, like, Zywoo, please. I ain't competing against you, mate. I'm competing against Coldzera, Get Right, Neo. I'm trying to be the GOAT of all GOATs, motherfucker. And if you're on that level, that's how you know, by the way, you don't need to be driven. Think about what I said earlier. There's no one to drive you. The other guys are dead and buried in demos and VODs, and this guy's not even anything yet. That would be exactly when the guy in the Pronogo scenario goes, I can chill now, homie. Yep. It's the opposite. For that guy, it's like, I'm so drawn that I have to be the greatest of the greatest of the greatest. I need to now outdo everything they did as well. And that's a fucking sick mentality to have. By the way, it's not recommended for normal people who will probably destroy your life. But if you're one of these aliens who can just handle it, you can see the results. Like, they can't be fucked with. That's why I always say I'm totally in favour of an open conversation about Western ideas of mental health and how much is overwork and can you burn someone out? Do you break them mentally? But I will say this. Don't ever tell me that we don't need to do the Asian method until you can show me a method that gets the same championships. Because I tell you what, they've got the fucking chips to show for it, haven't they? You might not like how they did it. They might have ruined a whole bunch of kids' lives. But I tell you what, they got all those fucking shiny cups, haven't they? So until you can figure out a way to do it, you can have a perfectly comfortable time and finish 9th. You won't ever be remembered.
Well, the narrative that keeps happening here is that Korea's not in Counter-Strike. It's almost like we've been allowed to A/B test them, but without ever
go on about that all the time.
Yeah,
and by the way, I'm also so obnoxious. I have absolutely told people like Neo and Get Right to their face, like, you are the GOAT. But the problem is, knowing what I know about esports, the real GOAT probably was in Korea and he never played CSGO. He was in League of Legends or StarCraft. They don't like that, by the way, because as usual, they're like, you don't know that. You don't know if I wouldn't beat him. It's like, I know what you mean, but the problem is, I don't just have to take one guy, like this guy, you know, like when MVP PK was in Counter-Strike. Yeah. I don't have to go, I'm comparing you to Zeta. It's like, I've got 100,000 of these guys. Let's just see. They're all going to practice as much as you. Let's see if one of them's as good. And you see my point, like, just the numbers. Run the numbers, homie.
Yeah, because you can say that there's 100,000 people playing in Europe or whatever, but they're not practicing as hard as the Koreans do, and that's the main thing, right?
They are weird them, even at the pro level, like fucking Smoothie out there. They're just all like, "Oh, lol, simple. What are you doing? What are you doing? Ah, you won't believe this. No, I'm not in a team. Let me just spread everyone's business around. That'll get me in teams. I won't be hated or resented or anything. I've been kicked from another team. It wasn't even Nico's fault. Shit, I'm not in that team. I mean, it wasn't my fault this time. Like fucking. That's what pros are like in the West, mate. They're all fucking clown show, aren't they?
I can't believe I qualified for an RMR. Get me on HLTV confirmed front.
Yeah.
So ridiculous.
Mate, they were reaching that week. There's been certain weeks where I've noticed this. Just watch out. See if you know what I mean. I haven't double checked this, but I'm almost certain when it's like Smoothie, they don't even do the fucking silhouette. Like, can you guess who it is? Because no one would ever guess, would they? So I think they just go, coming up this week, Smoothie. That's how you know they're just desperate for a guest that week. Like, hey, it's Moses. Like, yeah, exactly, because you never fucking guess, would you? It's not really a top tier guest.
That's the thing. I wonder why that's one of those shows where I guess their gimmick is they always have a guest, but I mean, their gimmick is that they always have this.
To be fair, it is the show. I'll give them this credit. This is a very unique thing to generate as a sentiment. It's the only show I'm aware of where pros go out of their way to try and come on the show. You can dislike, as I do, many elements of the show, but that's a very unique. Like, that takes. There's a talent to being able to develop that relationship. Sure, some of it's the community hub or not, but even so, everyone can make excuses. There's only one set of people who've done it.
That's true. And it's one of those things, as the limited amount of information you do get, just like those French articles we were talking about, or French interviews, it's like, all right, you get a little bit of insight. And I guess when Smoothie decides to air other people's dirty laundry as well, sure. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
No, he never talks about all his problems in all those teams. The real juice you'd want to hear about. Weird that, isn't it? Weird that. Yeah.
It's almost like none of those were questions asked by the people on the show. That's strange. That's very weird. Couldn't be that, though. Couldn't be that.
Yeah, but you have to understand, there's not that many people per no-go who'll basically say to Forrest, by the way, I don't think you're the GOAT of CS. I would have said Neo personally. So why do you think you're the GOAT, if indeed you do? You know, go ahead, go ahead. No, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to do that, mate.
And for them to not immediately click off.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's hard as well, by the way. Yeah. Anyone can be obnoxious. Spoiler, just like if you're obnoxious to me and I don't know you, I'll block you. Yeah, it's done. You know, one thing I always think's weirdly weird about that whole thing, though, where people try to be like outraged, I'll block people. They don't seem to understand, Scriv, what you call an asymmetric relationship. Like, I don't know them. They don't add any. All they do is add one number on a number that I have 200,000 of. They add one to that. Like, mate, that's like if I had $200,000 and you were like, well, I'll take my dollar out. It's like, who gives a shit? Take it, mate. You can go fuck yourself. I've had $199,999, wouldn't I? Like, so the problem is they think like, but I just said the things you're saying. It's like, yeah, but you gain something from following me. You want to interact with me. I don't know you from Adam, mate. And I always think like that. You have to realize it's the same in media. Just because you come up and go, hey, Forrest, you want to do an interview? I mean, he might, but he's not going to do it just because of you. You have to earn that status too. I notice everyone loves to boost other people past me in that regard too. All I'll say is this: the real series that is the sleeper, Scriv. You can go check it out, mate. If you've never watched it, there's some fun. Just pick a one where it's a player you like. It's when I did the series called Stratbook.
Yeah,
this one shits on all the other content in esports, mate. It's the perfect like blend of like narratives with like some really key insights. With like we bring them out when they're not talking about that to some other, and like basically if you just see the way we make these players comfortable, because I've got Legia there, he's sort of got the status that they know he was a coach and a player, and they know he's got B, so he must know something. It's like the environment I created was very specific, and basically. It's hard to get them on the show, but mate, when you get them on, you just drain them like a sponge. All the fucking shit comes out. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's one of those ones where, like I say, it was never my biggest series or my main one, but that's one I think will age mega well. You'll be able to go back and watch and see how these IGLs use the players and the coaches set the teams up and stuff.
All right. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I was just thinking, like, as well with the pros and everything. Maybe we've mentioned the Not Out Here podcast a little bit on this one. They all follow him. So, you know, maybe he's going to.
They're all looking for the name.
Yeah, by the way, here's a random thought. Obviously, be careful. You are fellow content creators. What do you think of that podcast? Because as far as I can tell, it's just some sort of like semi-whack esports train wrecks podcast without train wrecks. By the way, the main reason people watch that show. And also, train wrecks at least understands his audience. He knows that like a Richard Lewis or someone's going to hear her and interrupt him and just go, you shut the fuck up. Like, he did that to make the drama fire. The Not Out Here one's just loads of people chilling. It's almost like a lobby that hasn't begun yet. Sort of like, when's this thing start? Like, yeah, anyway, I think women's esports is good. And they're like, oh, right, I agree. And you know what I think? Being a bit bold here, I think we should have more of it. Hey. Like, I don't hate on him. I just don't know what the premise is. I don't understand what's going on. I can't tell if that's the only time he's had 20 people in a chat before, so that's the only way he can do it. I don't know. He's organised his own parties now, isn't he?
Scriv, it's so weird. It's like my take just came out of our guest's mouth. What happened to that?
Okay.
But look, so I mean,
same deal.
I've been on a couple times. I've been on a couple times, right? And I think obviously it's a different angle of content that they're kind of going for from what Nart usually does. And it's also gotten a little, I think, sometimes things take, like his Nades Out Here, which is like the shorts channel and everything. That on Twitter has overtaken. So they're sort of like little in-joke is that it's Nades Out Here, because that Twitter's massive as compared, so people
it makes sense, more specific,
the snippets.
Yeah,
exactly. And
exactly.
I use it a lot, mate. When I'm playing, still do with my mates, not to a super high level, but I'll give it a bit of a let's have a look and see. We don't play this map too much. Let me try and work on and find. But I think they maybe went in with a little bit lesser of a game plan, let's say, in terms of, and I mean, much for us to say because we don't even have a fucking overlay, so you know what I mean. But they kind of went in with maybe indeed just trying to get people on, and I was kind of like, I got asked for one episode, and then I was like, I'd like to be involved again, right? It's good for the profile, and like I say, they have a few pro players on. They got this idea to interview pros and all that. If I get the follow on Twitter, I could maybe get them on some of my content.
Okay, yeah, that's a good angle. That's a good angle.
And I think now it seems like they've started to refine a little bit. They've done a few interviews, a few more sort of topic-based things with people. Like, I'm not going to get asked to do NA Esports. I know the top teams. Right. I know some of the mid-level teams.
Oh, there's a theme
by
now.
name.
There's actually a theme to
so
the
they kind of they're and like I say, refine. And some of the guests that will go on, you might not know them necessarily, but I don't know. Is it a springboard angle where it's like, right, let's get every motherfucker on the planet.
The networking angle actually sounds like a good one. I hadn't thought of that, because I will just say, if you know my style, I love to break the fourth wall to let people know what I'm doing. All I'll say is this, because people think they're slick, like I'm not noticing. Have you ever noticed how, spoiler, I book the guests for the shows I do with Maui Snake, etc., right? That's why they're straight fire. So when I book the guests, right, you will notice that these people will have never in any context interacted with Maui ever. But as soon as I do an episode or they come on, magically they're on like his podcast next. Spoiler, that's because they're already in a group. He clicks add friend. They've just talked to him an hour before. They're like, yeah, man, what the hell? Go on. And then magically they accept the like, by the way, that's just smart. That actually is. That angle's quite a good one. I hadn't thought that is a good angle actually for sort of tier 2 and tier 3 people. Yeah, get as many contacts as you can. Yeah. And when you talk to them, they know who you are.
What's crazy, Thorin, is that you say that about the Maui Stink podcast, but then I was able to do that with this show at Snappy. So it worked out. It's third order.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But I will say especially the women's esports episode was a bit wacky. I swear there was like 4 different graphics on Twitter where it was like, and now we have some more people. Like they just kept kind of, it seemed like maybe they'd reached out and they just didn't really know how to say no, and they're like, fuck it, let's see how far we can go. But that one definitely was kind of the peak of it, where I swear, it's like the boxes ended up being like little postage stamps on your screen because there's so many people on it. But I mean,
it's like 39 people being silent while Anders talks about
right. It's an interesting.
It's so insane.
I think they hit the limit. They hit the roof.
Yeah, mate. How do they get like 20 people to just sit there silent?
I know,
because the joke is any other show, everyone's going mental, aren't they?
Yeah. But I guess that's the thing as well. They certainly have had some people on that. I'd say I don't have a massive amount of experience. I've been building the sort of podcast experience, and I've done my interviews and been on a couple of your shows and things like that. But I think they maybe did have some people on that were like, maybe more listeners than they are talkers and things like that, So there is definitely that angle. But look, I think great connections, and indeed they'll be able to get some good people on because a lot of pros follow him. And I don't know, you just keep, that's kind of what I came to Pronogo with this, was like, let's just kind of start, because that seems to be the hardest thing for me as someone who's a little bit, I would say, and I'm trying to, it's really interesting you're having this conversation around, motivation and sort of drive and getting yourself there and all that. I would probably, I think it was OJ on his Richard Lewis show that said this, is sort of like a lazy perfectionist. Right, where I've got
worst combo.
Exactly. I've got like the vision of kind of what I want, but I can't edit very well. I can't design graphics very well, so I've got to get someone else to do it, and that's more conversation, that's money involved, and you know, and you come up with this, and it's definitely something that I've tried to work on, and career, and you know, all sorts, and yeah, well, again, that's another podcast.
Here's the thing, mate.
And all that, but...
Let's be real. No one likes to admit it. It's scary to be shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's scary, right?
Absolutely.
And
never try, never fail is a big like motto that I had.
There's
when I was
even
younger,
like there's a super weird phenomena as well if you've never tried and been shit at something, which is when you first try and you're shit, you then like learn a few techniques, you try some, and you'll actually get shitter initially because you won't know how the techniques work, and you'll like get even worse, and you'll just think, what the fuck is the point of this? Well, spoiler, that is what I used to think about writing in esports. Sure. That's what I used to think about speaking in esports. I thought that, if you don't know, I used to do 2-minute interviews and have to cut them off after 1:30 because I ran out of questions. I didn't know what to think, and I couldn't handle awkward silences. Now the joke is, those are my strengths. Because what I did is I embraced the idea that I had to be shit to get good. Spoiler, that is even a fact. Nobody can act, even if Simple was like good when he started CS, he was a million miles from now. So even he, compared to the great player, was shit at the time. Everyone has to be shit. And once you learn, being shit isn't a sign you'll never be good. It's actually like directing you to being good. Because the genius is everything you don't do implies what might work. So the joke is, it's like, I always say this, you know when people say, I have ladder anxiety, I don't want to lose my rank, then you were never that ranked for real because you had to protect it. Here's the thing, I would just play endless games and not even look at the wins and losses, and I'll just trust that if I'm actually good and I'm playing the right, I'll get to where I'm supposed to be. So I've never believed in elo hell. Spoiler, every time I was in a low rank, I probably just was barely playing, or I was playing like an idiot, or I'm just doing stupid shit out of pro games that doesn't work on matchmaking. If you ever actually do what no one wants to do, like I had made a video how to get good at CS, you're all going to go, lol, what would you know? Just watch it, mate. The joke is, this is what every coach would tell you. I tell you stuff like, just learn the basic spots and play them until you know why you hold the spots that way. Then do a crazy angle or a boost. Just learn the basic techniques in aimbots. Shoot the spray that way. Figure out why you do it that way. Now you can fuck around and just fire deagles. You know what? You basically, in every technique area, you learn all the rules, which no one wants to do because they all want to believe I'm the secret genius that doesn't need the rules. Yeah. You can only get rid of the rules once you know them, because then you know why you break them, don't you? So I think that's an interesting tangent there, Scrib, because I think a lot of people have struggled with what you've struggled with. And a lot of people who are very successful might have as well, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, definitely still work. I feel like it's all learning, but yeah, who knows, man. I'm still early enough in this, but it might be something that early on, as more people we've talked about, you know, getting involved, maybe I'd say it's probably hindered. Combination of like COVID, I wasn't quite at the level that I wanted to be at, you know, to get the online dream hacks and things like that. But you know, it's a really sort of interesting kind of, because I'd probably come from a position where for me, I did my dad's an actor. I've done a lot of that. It's a bit more sort of natural. This, like, I'm comfortable doing this, right? So it is that sort of work angle that, yeah, indeed, you've really got to get past. And
I mean, whoever this character is you've made, it's amazing. The method acting is great. It's a ridiculous character. It's like someone from Little Britain or something. But listen, whoever you are, I'd love to meet the real you. You know?
Aye, indeed. Well, there you go. But look, I'm happy there, to be honest, fellas. We've hit nearly 2.5 hours, so yeah, I'm pretty happy. If you're all good as well, Pronogo, anything else to add, or?
We didn't get to talk about Kerrigan is the GOAT IGL Overglaive confirmed, and we didn't get to
another time.
Things, but yeah, there's plenty more time, so
there we go.
No worries there. We'll cover it all.
Indeed. All right, wonderful stuff. Well, thank you very much once again, Thorin, for coming on. Been really good. Some great conversations, some really interesting, angles and all that good stuff, and mainly kept it to Counter-Strike, which is an improvement over when we had Vu on falling over at the end. So hopefully a cleaner finish on this one. But yes, indeed. Thank you very much, everybody out there, of course, for watching, and we will catch you again next week.
You're going to love this video right here. You're going to love it. Check it out right now.